Good. All right. First, I want to see if anybody needs to call in order to an executive session tonight. No. Do I have to do a motion on that or anything, Sue? Okay. But then we'll start our regular meeting. First, I'd like you to silence all cell phone devices, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Any additions and deletions since Friday's mailing?
Just gonna have a correction and a deletion. We're gonna delete 7.2 tonight, and we're gonna be correcting 7.3, just some dates that will be reflected in my minutes.
Okay. We need to accept the minutes from the April 5th.
We just need a motion.
Oh, you're right, sorry.
Okay.
A motion. Ms. Hotali? Accept. Ms. Hotali? Second. Mr. Ross? All in favor? Okay. And now we need to do the acceptance of the April 5th BOE meeting. Need a motion? Mr. Ross? Second? Oh my goodness, Mr. Dale, I'm losing the first name, sorry. All in favor? All right. Now we'll move on to award, honors, recognitions.
So 2 things about that.
Okay.
First, we're going to move the attendance poster contest winners to our May 3rd meeting, correct, Fred?
Okay.
And we'll begin the K-12 instructional program and review presentation in a little bit. We'll go through the rest of the agenda, and we're waiting, the leaders will arrive, and we'll be able to do it then.
Oh, okay. So you want to skip
Thank you.
for that. All right. Do we have any hearing petitions? We don't, that I know of. All right, then I would need a motion for one or all of business considerations.
I make a motion to accept all the business considerations 6.1 through 6.14.
Do I have, Mr. Ross? Second? Oh, I'm gonna go Miss Jenny.
That's what my students call me at school.
All in favor?
Well, you have to go, is there any discussion?
Oh, any discussions, yes. I actually just wanted to call out the donation of $50 for the middle school from the halfway house to be used for their field trips from the middle school French club. So thank you for that donation. Any other discussions?
Do you want to just give a little insight to 6.5?
6.5.
Kind of how this is
Oh.
a part of our annual meeting.
Right. So each of the component school districts, the 24 school districts that are part of the Capital Region BOCES, are required to vote on this particular Wednesday. So even if their meetings aren't tonight, they all met sometime today to vote for the slate of officers, incoming board members for Capital Region BOCES. And you can see in the list here that they're obviously from a variety of school districts. And it's impressive how broad the representation is on their board. I do believe that there are, I'm not sure how they get to this point where we are electing the slate of officers, whether or not they had, more than there were vacant seats. I'm not sure. Because you'd think at some juncture that might happen. And certainly any of our board members are welcome at some juncture to apply and be a part of that as well. It's fascinating to look at governance from that level. We certainly, at the last meeting or the meeting before, we shared out the annual review of the investments that we've made in BOCES and they've made in us. And as you know, we are highly reimbursed when we invest and work with them. And many of our endeavors, we receive at least 48% reimbursement. So as a for instance, we have many students who go to CTE. That money comes back to us, 48% of it comes back in the following year. Likewise, if we have like a instructional coach, we get money back on that. Printing, if we decide to go with them. So, and they, of course, they're providing services to all 24 schools. It's like a city. Was that enough
Thank you.
insight?
Mm-hmm. Helpful.
Any other discussions?
On 613 and 614, the risk assessment, there was some discussion in there about an arrangement where, I guess, for lack of a better term, we supply gas to the local fire department, which we're going to be taking a look at.
Absolutely.
Right.
Why are we doing that, and in what quantity? It's hard to tell if this is like a little bit, a lot.
Well,
hard to quantify.
We are researching right now the total amount in the last few years that we've I guess, had an agreement with the local fire company and see how much we're going through, and then we're gonna go back and renegotiate to a more marketable rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a pump on, here?
Yes, over by the bus garage.
Yeah.
Okay. And
We
they
have-
bring the trucks here and
Correct.
fill up?
We have propane, diesel, and gas. I'm not saying that they use all three of them. They don't use propane.
Yeah.
But the idea is that it's like a consortium intended to being able to buy in bulk and save our local municipalities money. But the intention is for it to be revenue neutral. We're not supposed to be carrying any of that. So if the cost of a gallon of diesel is $4.10 to us, that's what we will be charging those agencies. So that's what Jess was talking about, and ensuring that we reviewed that. What had happened is, when prices changed, we hadn't made changes to our agreement with them. So that's what the auditor identified as something we needed to address.
Okay. How do we measure that? I mean, is it honor system? They record how many gallons they pumped out? And
There's a fob, so they
Okay.
have a fob, and then the fob turns on the pump
Gotcha.
then says, hey, the fob number 6
Okay.
took 30 gallons of
And
diesel.
then we've got a system with that.
Yep, the system, so we can pull reports and see
Yeah.
how much they've taken over a period of time.
Okay.
Could this negatively affect us at all? You say that we haven't changed the price of gas. Well, I'm pretty sure the price is only
Oh,
going
yeah,
up.
that has negatively affected us, that's true. But going forward, we intend to correct that. I don't know how long the agreement is with them. You know, I mean, I don't know whether it's like a 3-year term or a 2-year term, but regardless of how it's written going forward, we'll be at cost, wherever our cost is. And of course, that's gonna be challenging in a way too, because it's ever fluctuating. So it would be at the cost of the last time our tank was filled, basically, each time they have it filled. And then we invoice them and they reimburse us. That's correct, Jess?
Yeah.
And we had upgraded those pumps and measurements just a few years ago, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, do I need a motion for one or all of the personnel considerations?
I'll make the motion for 7.1 through 7.11 minus 7.2.
Minus, oh, no. First?
Oh, I can second it.
Oh, Miss Jenny. Any discussion?
I had a couple of questions. For 7.1, why are we reinstating? Was there
Actually, I was gonna ask that
a
too.
reason, like, for Mr. Charmello?
Oh, yeah.
Did
Over
he
the-
leave and come back, or?
Over the past 5 years, we've had a few staff members for various reasons who didn't complete their educational work in time to receive their
Okay.
certification. And by law, we are not allowed to employ non-certificated people in probationary or permanent positions. So when that happens to an employee, we drop them back to substitute status for the duration of time it takes them to complete the work. And then we reinstate them. So that's why.
So is he done with his schooling, or still
That
in
is correct.
process?
He's done.
He's done, so he can officially be, okay.
Yeah, but you're right, that he's been here for a long time,
Well,
so.
my daughter had
it
him a
is-
couple of years ago, so I
Sure.
didn't know if he had left and come back, because she
Yeah.
didn't have him in that time frame. And then
Um,
for,
Yeah, we've had maybe 4 folks who had that happen to them in the last few years. Just-
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah, it didn't help.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
And then what's the other one?
For 7.3, is she a futuristic hire? Or he? I'm not sure, Quinn Griswold.
Say it again.
For the
Jenny.
math teacher for 7.3,
Yeah,
the effective date is to be coming up? like this
Yes,
September?
she's currently serving as a long-term sub for us through
So she'll be
COVID.
transitioning into
COVID
that
money, and we're
role.
gonna transition her into.
Okay.
yeah.
I guess my concern was like if she's gonna start in September, something could have happened for them, but if she's already in district, that seems
Correct.
better. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor? That brings us to our special reports. Mr. Reveley does not have anything, nor do I. Moving on to Dr. Bailey, unless you want to stop and do your presentation, or you want to wait.
Just the middle school.
Okay.
I was going to say, we just had a policy meeting, and some of the larger things that we discussed in that was the structure of our processes. And Jesse, coming into the district with experiences elsewhere, has made some good suggestions that we're moving to a digitized version of that, so that all of us in the committee will have access online and can make suggestions in between meetings. And we come into meetings and having discussions about what our thoughts are, rather than reading the policies when we come to the meeting. The other things that we decided on was that as we go through and approve policies, we'll bring them right to the board for their first reading. So there are 4 that we talked about today that will be coming to May 3rd. What else? Ed or Mike?
Right, so the policies we brought to the board and read here first, or we would see them first? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you'll see them ahead of time.
Okay.
And board policies are traditionally required to have a first reading by the board and a second reading by the board.
Okay.
So it'll be at 2 meetings, and then in the 3rd meeting, we would approve them. We can sometimes fast track them and just do 1 reading. If it's like, as I was saying to Mike and Ed, if it's a policy that is one that we didn't have, or one that needs to be changed to be in compliance, we would just do 1 reading and we would move it along quicker, but that's not normally the case. Yeah, it's reading like in the term of different locations. They go into the auditorium and perform, judges adjudicate them, and then they leave. And for the first time, we don't have to get on a bus to do it ourselves. So,
This year, when is that happening?
May, first week in May, or
It's next Tuesday.
end of next week?
I'm pretty sure it's next Tuesday. My daughter's in chorus, and the email said that she needed to have concert dress for Tuesday.
Very soon.
Okay.
Their planning is far ahead of my cognizance.
All right. That's cool.
People poop.
Yeah, it is great. Also on May 3rd, since John Sharkey's going to be here talking about construction, we're going to present on the playgrounds at that time. I know that a board member had asked about that at our last meeting. It makes sense because it's all wrapped into the construction project. So John will be here doing that. We were going to present to the Community Business Association tomorrow. That was unfortunately canceled, but we've shared our budget presentation, which is essentially the one we'll do for the hearing, with them, and they'll share it with their members.
Can I ask one question about the playground?
Sure.
So the installers did reach out to the person who wrote the grant for the middle school one, and they were looking to install the first week of May. Is that not gonna happen? Or were you not aware of that?
Who called about what?
The installers called one of the people who wrote the grants for the middle school playground, and we're looking to install it
They
this
should
weekend.
definitely call Bill Schramm.
Yeah, okay. They probably
Yeah.
were working with that too. Okay.
Middle school's getting a playground?
Yeah, there was a grant written for the middle school. I think it's more like an obstacle course or like a climbing kind of structure. It's not like a playground with slides and stuff.
Not a traditional playground in the way. Sue, is the Wednesday board calendar on the table as well, or was it only sent ahead of time?
It's not with them, I sent it to them on Friday.
Yep,
Okay.
we have that in our email.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I didn't know, I have one, you wanna see it?
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
The Wednesday Board of Education calendar for 23-24.
Okay.
I don't know whether it'll
Works.
photocopy worth a darn. I definitely want you to be able to look at it if it's relevant.
For something we have to act on?
No, just a discussion on it. So first, I guess you're right, we can talk about it conceptually. First, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, the school calendar for next year is quite spread out. It ends on a Wednesday. There are extra days in March. There's a 5-day weekend for Memorial Day. And what we made a decision to do a couple of years ago was we reduced our board meetings to basically one a month, with the exception of during budget season and in August, when we know we have a lot of board appointments for staff. So first, I wanted to ask whether the board is interested in continuing having meetings on Wednesdays as opposed to another night. Histrionics, we went from Tuesdays to Wednesdays because we had a lot of board members with children who play basketball. Games were always Tuesday and Thursday, and it was always interfering with board meetings. Of course, we have board members who have children that do everything, so they're interfering with every night now. There you go. So first, I wanted to ask if you're interested in continuing on Wednesdays.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
personally care.
Okay. So,
Wednesday's fine.
and the
Are you
proposal.
okay with Wednesdays?
Yeah, Wednesdays are fine, and it coincides with the BOCES Wednesday meeting, which is great. That way we don't have to have an extra meeting. And I think having it in the middle of the week is easier for a lot of people, both in preparation for the meeting and then remediating or following up on things. I know a lot of folks who have board meetings on Mondays, and I can't imagine how they get things ready in order to get things ready. So the second question would be, as it stands right now, and this is why having it in front of you would be helpful, the months where we have 2 meetings are August and January, February, March, April, May. And the months where we only have 1 meeting, September, October, November, December, June and July. Yeah.
What's the thought behind May? Aren't we usually already had the vote?
We, if we waited until the budget vote, sometimes, like in this next year, the budget vote is on the 21st.
Gotcha.
So we wouldn't have a board meeting for a month if we did that. I mean,
We have to approve that. Yeah, right.
yes, so,
September and October was difficult with just one meeting because they ran really long because we were going down to the award ceremonies. And coming in quick for exact award ceremonies on the same night, it's almost like that should be separate.
Yeah.
Or of a separate 2 board meetings where that's incorporated in one, because it was like 2 weeks in a row we came in and went there and it just pushed things back. So I don't know if there's there was 3 of them, right?
or,
Well, wasn't it 4?
Or
One for each
4,
building.
so-
For each building.
It just pushed everything longer, so I don't know if it's just a separate thing we come in for, if 2 meetings is better. It seems like, I guess the thing is with appointments, if most of them in August, it's fine, but if there is an appointment, then you have to, someone you wanna appoint, you gotta wait 30 days for us to come in and have the next meeting. So I don't know if 2 board meetings are better in those months, or if it's just that the awards thing is on an alternate week than the board meeting.
yeah, the other thing we have to remember, which we only exercised one time, is we had a workshop this year. It's a non-board meeting, no agenda.
Right.
So it's significantly more flexible as far as, you know, substance and structure of it. So I don't, I think you're on the right track, Ed. We could move those out into a different night of the month. It could be any night of the month, it doesn't even have to be on a Wednesday, and have the award ceremony separate. They're short, they were all less than half an hour, some of them were 15 minutes. It's not a problem to do that, and that would help.
It was, it's like, but then, by the time we got there and we got out and got back, it was more like, you know, they added another 10, 15 minutes, so. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, there's a
We do them
reception
on an
too.
alternate night,
Right.
Is it a bad idea to like put the elementary together?
We've talked about that, and I think the initial thought was it lessened the
Right.
specialness of it, but I know we do it with middle school and high school. Well, let's start by moving the award ceremony out of the meeting itself, so we can do that. And that'll help, you know, in what you're talking about. The other thing that we did do, Ed, is when we were in an unusual circumstance in the fall where we had someone we knew we had to hire, we just begged the indulgence of the board, scheduled a meeting, special meeting, and we had folks come in and, you know, did it in a 5-minute meeting.
We did a
to approve.
virtual one too, right, at one point?
Say it again?
I thought we did a virtual one
That
last
changed
summer.
though.
Yeah, we used to be able to do it, we can't do
Okay,
it
you
now.
can't. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Start times at 6 o'clock, okay?
Yeah.
And you look around the room, you know, you walk in and you're like, wow, this AV that you see installed here is part of the Career Cafe. The idea initially was for this to be a vibrant place that students first felt at home in, but also promoted college and career readiness. For any of us who've been to college in the last 3 decades, this is what a student union looks like. Comfortable seating, access to AV, and this has been on order for a year. It's just supply chain stuff. It's taken this long to install. What we'll be able to do in here is we'll be able to live stream. Brian and all of his patients and all of his carts will go away. We have these 2 cameras here that are able to be operated remotely. We'll be able to broadcast all the things that we need to on the screens here. No more projector screen set up. And during the day, students can do presentations in here. They can see, they can hear guest speakers. They can conduct job fairs. There will be microphones connections. There's AV connections on this post in the back of the room and in here. This is what that room is supposed to be. Students, to be prepared to go out into the workplace in the world, need to have access to a space like this. So we're very pleased, and we're hoping maybe by May 3rd, we'll be up and running. This took a full week for the team to put in. For everything you see, there's 100 things that are hidden inside the walls. And there's a new projector and a new screen in here that it's fantastic. This is what our students deserve, and it will improve the flow of our meetings in here as well. I was going somewhere with that. May 3rd. Yeah, so being able to stream events in here, including our board meetings, it'll be a huge improvement. A huge improvement. No more projector in the middle of the room. I don't know about the snake. We haven't talked about the microphones yet, but there'll be a different microphone setup as well. For students, when they're presenting, there'll be a couple handheld mics they can use in here in various places. Our audience was complained about the sound quality. There are speakers on these 2 posts, on those 2 posts, and there's on 2 posts on the wall back here when the wall is open. So a very different experience. And if you were to walk into any workplace, a professional workplace, this is what it would look like. So that's the experience we want for our students, and we're going to benefit from that in our meetings, which is a win.
Is that wall closed during the school day as well?
Usually.
Okay.
Yeah, because we use this room frequently for meetings during the day. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll bring the proposed board calendar up for a vote at the next meeting. Once we've done that, it'll enable everyone else in the district to start madly putting their events on the calendars, athletics and music performances. And we hold board meeting nights fairly sacred. It doesn't work perfectly for athletics because it's other schools as well. But we do try and keep all other school events off of those Wednesday nights. And we'll change the things on the bottom that talk about high school, middle school, elementary recognition awards. Okay.
Anything else? Mr. Engelhardt, you're up.
I want to highlight a couple of college and career activities that are going on next Thursday. High school counselors are holding a college panel night on Thursday, April 27th. It'll also be a 6 o'clock here in the Career Cafe for sophomore and junior students. Representation from College of St. Rose, SUNY Albany, Hudson Valley Community College will be here as well. So it's a great opportunity for students and families to come and learn a little bit more about the process. Also here at the Career Cafe, Ms. Filson is bringing an FBI linguist. So Ms. Filson is our world language CCS curriculum content specialist. So that will be during the day on April 27th, and she's encouraging classes to bring down students to learn a little bit more about careers in FBI, but specifically around translators and things like that. So it's a great opportunity for us to learn more about that. Today was our first day of 3 through 8 New York State testing. So at the next board meeting, I can give you some numbers regarding participation. It was only middle school and A.W. Becker today. Tomorrow, Peter B. will be starting that testing.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
If a family refuses, what is that child's score considered for our district?
It would be a 0.
A 0, not a 1?
Correct. And then lastly, CNI tomorrow. Just so people know.
CNI. We're just a CNI tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes.
I think Fred was talking about world languages. It is worth noting that our second world traveling trip just got back
Oh, yeah.
successfully. And that was I'm going to get it wrong, it was Italy, France, Italy, and Spain.
Yes.
But they made it back successfully. Fred's wife and daughter were on the trip, so I knew I would have firsthand knowledge of something going great.
Yeah, they had a great experience. Very tired. They make them run and walk a lot. I think it was 50 some odd miles they clocked or something like that. And you know, for those who have gone to Europe or seen movies, it's not an easy walk. It's cobblestones and uphills and downhills. And one of the first pictures I got was of people passed out on the streets of Milan because they were so tired. But it was a great experience. A lot of, you forget. It's great, the history, the content, the language, the cultural piece, but the interpersonal skills that students are faced with, sharing rooms with folks they don't necessarily know. They met up with a team from North Carolina and made some really great friendships from that as well. So it was a great experience.
Do they tend to meet up with other schools, like when they take these trips?
So not necessarily so. And this was a pretty large group. We had 27 this time we went. But the definite focus on all these trips isn't what we would ourselves maybe ordinarily plan. It isn't a day at the beach and then a day in a museum. It is education from beginning to end. And they really work hard to give the view behind the scenes. And that, like the Costa Rica trip, it was a meeting with people who live in the country and eating their food and learning about their culture, and the same thing here. And it is called educational EF tours for a reason. It is, it's a lot of work. The kids do a lot of work. And the advisors who bring them also do a lot of work. So I'm very grateful to have people on staff who are willing to do that.
That's it?
That's it, thank you.
Mr. Mullen?
So tonight I just wanted to kind of go over some of the items that some of the departments that I oversee are working on recently. So first, transportation. So transportation is preparing for the Discovery Camp and extended school year transportation. And in about 2 weeks, they're going to be preparing for the next school year. And that comes with a lot of routing and seeing what individual is going to be on what bus and along those lines. We've received all of our new buses that we ordered last year, and all of them are on the road now. One of the key equipment features are on these new buses are larger luggage boxes, which is coming in handy with some of our sports trips.
And instruments.
And instruments as well, yes. So then they'll start the pilot around the end of May and to be ready to roll out by later this summer. So if you remember in one of our presentations, Craig talked about this app, and this would give access to parents give them a little bit more ability to communicate with those parents directly instead of seeing those text messages at 5 o'clock saying, you know, this bus is going to be late, this bus won't be. It's more like it will just go to those bus parents saying, hey, your bus is going to be late by 5 minutes. And then eventually we're trying to get, so we can have geographic regions where they'll say, hey, the bus is 2 minutes out. So parents will be more aware to be out at the bus stop for their kids. So we're pretty excited about that, but we're still working on some stuff with that. So facilities has also been very busy. So I know we've talked a little bit about some of the dishwasher stuff. So I wanted to bring that today. So the high school dishwasher was just completely installed with a new dishwasher in the high school kitchen, and replaced out the old one. And the old one was from the mid-'80s, so it was well overdue to be, and this was all grant funded. So A.W. Becker, we also purchased a new dishwasher there, and they're just waiting on the unit. The safety issue that was brought up in one of our meetings has been resolved.
With this purchase or with the existing?
It's been resolved immediately. So we do not have the new one yet, but the safety issue has been fixed.
Okay, so it's not spreading out.
Right, yeah, there's no one will be harmed currently. So we did that, and so yeah, their safety, it's safe to operate right now until the new one comes in. Gym lighting, we have new gym lighting scheduled to be installed in the weight room in the wrestling gym. The lighting was funded, partially funded through National Grid rebate program. So we were also able to purchase 2 new ride-on floor machines with some grant money. And they have arrived, and the employees will be getting trained at the end of April. These machines will aid in the daily cleaning as well as summer maintenance work. Grounds work, as you guys can probably see, we're in full mode and athletic field maintenance. They also have done some repairs, some of those from the plow damage that was over the winter. And again, we're working on some campus beautification projects. Nature Trail at PBC. The trail committee had kicked off a meeting with trail design to begin the process of trail planning. And Pinnacle, which is I believe the trail design that the company we're using, will be on site over the next month to complete the work. And finally, the pool. The DOH inspection is scheduled for tomorrow, and that will complete all that work that we have been doing in the pool for now. And that's, and then I guess, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. And then the business office is year end, so there's a lot of work with getting ready for our single, implementing our single audit corrective action plans and getting ready for a deeper dive into our purchasing department that Mike Wolf suggested, and also preparing for year-end external audits. And I will be meeting with all the administrators and directors to plan what they plan to use for the remaining year with their budgets. I did want to talk about the state budget tonight and what that sees for our district, but unfortunately, as everybody knows, has not been approved yet. So hopefully at the next meeting I can talk about that. Yeah. That's all I got. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Billy, I just wanted to go back, I know we don't have Teddy here, but I have 2 things. One is a reminder that there's the Arts Festival coming up.
Yes.
So I believe that is the first weekend of May, Saturday. And I just wanted to take a second to congratulate an alumni of RCS, Shane Racy, who has broken the Cornell record of pole vaulting with a 17.7.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's impressive. Thank you.
Kristen,
Do you
would you
wanna-
okay? Yeah, we'll do the presentation and then we can finish out the agenda.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. There's something big over my head. It scared me when I walked underneath it. I would encourage you to roll up your sleeves. I believe that this is the most important presentation that you will hear so far this year. We've talked about an awful lot of things. We've talked about attendance data in the past. We've certainly talked about budgetary concerns and issues and frameworks, and certainly we've addressed policy and many, many issues. But in the end, every single thing that we do is really intended to equal student success. So there's a lot of content in here. And what I've asked the leaders to do is to think about the information in three components. One is, what does the data say? The second is, what do we think it means? So what is the problem that we believe exists? And then how are we going to resolve it? So what are the actions around that? As you listen to each of the buildings and our student support services talk, you'll hear them discuss it in those three frames. What does the data say? What do we think it means? And what are we going to do about it? Just a quick reminder, our mission statement, and again highlighting that we are responsible for all students. New York State expects that we're responsible for all students, and you'll see tonight they disaggregate the data in some pretty meaningful ways that we may not even think about. It isn't just students with disabilities, it's low socio, it's ethnic background, and each of those groups have their own unique needs, and we are expected to address those needs. Our habits of scholarship, which we hope to embed in all of our work, and of course, we're really hoping all of our students find enrollment, enlistment, or employment after graduation. So, as I mentioned, the whole purpose of this, how are we doing? The kids are the only thing that matters in the scheme of this discussion and the work that we're doing, and how are we getting to where they need to go. I talked a little bit about the multi-tiered system of support over some consecutive meetings. I mentioned that formerly it might have been called response to intervention, or RTI, which you may have heard over the years. MTSS is intended to encompass everything about the child, not just their academics. It could be their behavior, their attendance. And I just wanted to share with you a list of some of those things. We often talk about tiers 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 is the bottom of the pyramid. We want every student to have it, and this is not by any means an all-encompassing list of the resources we have at our disposal, but initial quality classroom instruction is the most important thing that we need to deliver. Every student is supposed to have access to that. And then beyond that, we have the enrichment and other types of activities that help give them a little extra boost. And tier 2 means that it might mean a little remediation, a little extra time. It doesn't have to be outside of a classroom. It can occur inside a classroom by a classroom teacher, or it could be outside of the day, as you see here. When we're talking about tier 3 and some tier 2s, students might leave the classroom to receive those special remediations. It could include a reading or a math interventionist. It could include social worker, working with a social worker, or our licensed clinical mental health counselor, or the satellite mental health we have with Northern Rivers, or any of other student support staff. And I put special education services in here as well. And you're going to hear our leaders talk about these services as part of some of the solutions that we'll be discussing tonight. And then, of course, it isn't just a resource, like a material resource. Sometimes it's about us coming together and having good discussions. So we know we have our resource officers, but the meetings that we have to discuss students and program and curriculum also are relevant to this discussion, because without collaborative work, we won't necessarily get there. And we have a lot of committees, including our parent meetings, that help get us there. The very last thing on the list, diagnostic measures of student performance and growth. And I'm going to over-encompass, and I will include state testing or standardized testing in that as well as the progress monitoring that you'll hear our leaders talk about today. This was the MTSS slide I shared with you before, so I won't go in depth around that. New York State has an expectation that we are delivering quality instruction around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that it be embedded in the fabric of the work that we do. We've spent the last 2 years training our staff, and we will be turnkeying some of this work with our students as we go forward. We've done bits and pieces with students throughout the 2 years, but we need to do that more meaningfully. And the idea is our schools all need to be welcoming. We have to have high expectations for rigor, inclusive in our curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional development for our staff. Every single one of us needs to retool on an ongoing basis. It's the only recipe that will add up to success in the long term. So with that, I will invite our elementary folks and Student Support Services to come up to the podium and talk through their data. And Carol. Carol's our data coordinator. Some of you may not have met her in your inner workings of school, but Carol's our data coordinator and our registrar for the district. And I will tell you that I ask hard questions of the leaders all the time, and right after they get off the phone with me, they call Carol and they ask for help in ensuring that they get the information that they need. So this, what you see on the screen here, and Carol's going to explain, is the combination of thousands of data points compressed into one slide and one sheet, which is impressive, but I'll allow her to talk through that.
Good evening. I'm going to do my best. I do have, I don't know if any of you have allergies. My allergies are going wild this year, so if I cough, I apologize for that. So this is the data that you might have seen or heard about from the state. This is our accountability status. It came out, it was actually finally official in March, which is very late. Part of that is that they had to kind of recalibrate after the pandemic. This was put on hold, the accountability was put on hold for a couple of years. And in recalibrating temporarily, they kind of limited the number of things they could look at because we don't have full sets of data. I'd expect that going forward, if any of you remember from our previous accountability discussions, there were about 7 different measures. So I would expect going forward that we're going to go back to something along those lines. But the 2 data points that they really have, that they felt were still valid, were state assessments. So that includes the 3 through 8 assessments and Regents exams were given last year, as well as attendance data. So what is interesting is that the first 2 measures that you see up there, the weighted average achievement level and the core subject performance level, are both based on, in this case we're talking elementary, so this is both based on our 3, 4, 5 assessment data. And you'll see that there are some differences between the 2. So for example, if you look at A.W. Becker's score for all students versus their core subject performance, they're different. And the reason for that is that the weighted average achievement level based on the federal law must include all of the students who refuse to take the test. So that you asked about, are those students a 1 or a 0? They technically will say that they are like a 1, but a 1 is really a 0 in the way this is accounted for. In other words, a student who scores a level 1 or a student who refuses doesn't give us any points, if it makes sense.
On how many students are refusing to add into your interpretation of the data? Because
yes, so
that student could potentially have received a 4 for all we know.
Right, so we don't know, we have no idea of what that student would have scored had they taken the test. I'm not sure if you're asking about, is there accountability on our participation rate?
No, I'm wondering if you know the difference between those that refused and those that actually scored a 1.
Not in these calculations. Like, I can see who those students are, but these calculations, it doesn't matter to them. The second measure, the core subject performance, takes those students who refused out of the equation altogether. So that's where, maybe that's the answer to your question. That's where those students who truly scored a 1 are still included in the calculation.
Yeah, that's
okay.
what I was kind of
Yeah.
thinking.
So there's a lot of data on here, and I want to just kind of really briefly, I know there's a key up there, but it's kind of small. So the color is the first thing that you would look at, and that tells us where we are. Everything that the state does, they like their 4 levels. So that tells us where we are in terms of levels. A blue means we're a level 4. We're in the top 25% of the state. These measures are all based on a state ranking. Red would be a level 1. We're in the bottom 10% of the state. Yellow is a level 2. That's the 11th to the 50th percent. percentile, and then level 3 is the 51st to the 74th percentile.
So these don't correlate to the scores?
These don't correlate to the scores at all. No, it's a very, very complex calculation. You know, we can chat at any point if you want me to go into it, but basically the color is kind of what the state says this is all that matters. But when we talk about this data, I'll have people who will say, well, we're a level 2, but are we a high level 2 or a low level 2, right? So those numbers, I actually was able to find the percentiles. So I had to do a little bit of a calculation, but the state does provide all of the information we need to figure out. So if you look, for example, again, we'll kind of look at that weighted average achievement for all students, the first one up on the top. A.W. Becker, for this particular school year on this particular data, was at the 64th percentile across the state. So if you put all of the districts, all the elementary schools in the state, ranked them, we'd be at the 64th percentile. Peter B. is at the 39th percentile, right? And so you can see that there are a lot of, there's a lot of data here for us to digest. The arrows, again, a question when the leaders started asking about this and building leadership teams looked at this, one of the questions was, well, how does this compare to previous years? And so these arrows just show us, and again, this is a raw score because the measure was not exactly the same as it was in 2018-19, which was the last time this was calculated. The arrows basically show whether our raw score improved or declined. Was better or worse, I should say, because for chronic absenteeism, it's flipped. So an arrow pointing down means that we are worse than we were in that year.
All the ones that are red.
Yeah.
Education.
Yes.
So for the first two categories, I'm assuming that the higher the percentile, the better the.
So for
indicator.
all of them, the
Okay,
higher
all
the
of them.
percentile,
Okay.
yes,
But
yes.
for
So chronic
absenteeism
absenteeism within the calculations, I've already accounted for the fact that more students being out is bad. So again, these are all percentiles showing our ranking. It's not the percent of students who are present or absent. It's where we are ranked in the state. So again, A.W. Becker, and we actually, surprisingly enough, with as much as we struggled with attendance last year, obviously the rest of the state also struggled because you can see that we are, for almost all of our elementary subgroups, we are either a level 3 or a level 4. So we are above the average for almost all of those groups across the state right now. Now, that may not hold. You know, you never know what's going to happen in another year. Anywhere that there are grade, there is a limit. You have to have at least 30 students, or 30 data points, 30 data points in order to calculate a measure. So anywhere it's gray, that means there were not enough data points. The state does that to protect student privacy. And also any one, you know, when you get to that small, any one student can make a huge difference. So this was our initial, like, kind of, we just, it's nice to kind of see where we are compared to the state, but this is not our end-all be-all. I just want you to know that as the leaders start to talk about their data, they use this as maybe a starting point, a jumping off point, and then they ask more questions. They look at their own internal data. We look at other assessments that we have. We look at things that are more meaningful maybe on a day-to-day basis.
What's included in the first two categories there?
So yeah, so weighted average achievement level, thank you for that, is our three, in this case, 3 through 5, ELA, math, and our 4th grade science exam. And it's a little bit of a calculation based on if you have, if the student receives a level 4, they get this number of points. If they receive a level 3, they get this number of points, and then it's all combined into one index, one raw score. So weighted average achievement level includes students who refused to take the assessment. They basically count like they got a level 1. Like they don't give us any credit, but they do count against us.
Okay.
In the core subject performance, it's basically the exact same calculation, except that students who refused are completely out of the calculation.
So why is that a lower number?
Well, so A.W. Becker last year actually had a pretty good participation rate. And so I think probably what happened is that you may have had a few more students who, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I just realized what I'm talking about. remember that these are state rankings. This is not
Okay.
64% of students pass. This
Okay.
is our state rankings. So, thank you for being patient with me. Those numbers are based on how other schools did as well. And honestly, what's interesting is that for this year, everything that the state did was all comparison-based. In the past, there were some that were comparison to the state, and there were some that were based on our own growth compared to ourselves. So I'm hoping that they go back to that, because that gives us a much nicer balance of
They
measures.
didn't give you the growth versus.
They
result
couldn't
this year?
because there isn't enough
Historical
information
data.
about growth, right? You have to have students who have multiple years of assessments, because they compared students to themselves.
So optimistically, like another year or two before they. even do that?
Yeah, I'm hoping. I know they're in the process right now of working on what next year will look like. This was a 1-year, like, temporary, they have to petition the state or the federal government to get it approved. This was a 1-year fix. They're already in the process of thinking what next year will look like. They have statisticians that are, way above me, so they'll be able to figure out if there's enough data to make it look. Usually what they do is they actually take the data that we have and they run some preliminary numbers to see what it's going to look like for schools.
So there's 3 components in each of those categories. There's ELA, math, and science.
And science for those two, yeah.
Are they treated equally, or is
They,
one weighed more heavily than the other?
For the elementary and middle school, they're all treated equally.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll talk about the high school when we get there. No, because I want to give our principals. Are there any other questions? We're going to see this for for middle school and high school as well. So if there's other things, we can talk about it. I want to turn it over to the principals.
So Carol keeps referring to, compared to all other school districts in New York State, you're talking about approximately 700 school districts. Imagine that each of them has a minimum of 2 elementary schools. Obviously, some have 1 and some have 10. That's 1,400 schools or more elementary level that we're talking about as far as percentile. And the only other thing that's relevant is you see the gray boxes where we had less than 30 in a cohort. New York State has traditionally, so let's say we had 15 take it this year and 15 take it next year. They sometimes then will give us an accountability for those areas that are gray. Are they still doing that, Carol? Will they still do it?
It's more in some areas than in others, and it was, like, I know for English language learners that is the case, that they will combine
Okay.
multiple years. I don't know if they're going forward, if they will do that with these as well.
So they've established a way that it's difficult to hide. You can't have a cohort of English language learners that's only 15 kids. Well, you have 15 kids, you'll never be held accountable. They've strategized a way to make sure that eventually you are held accountable. So, elementary?
Will be required to provide any plans or any kind of strategies in the future? Like, do we have to extrapolate something we have to work on?
Not yet.
Okay.
No, but I will tell you, it's a great question, Tina, because a designation, we don't have a designation, and when they say designation in New York, they're not meaning rainbows and sunshine. It's a bad designation. We did not receive any negative designations, but they have expected all of us, and Fred and Carol and some of the principals have been attending session after session after session of what these designations mean and what we will be expected to do. Because as Carol mentioned, this is just a snapshot of just this year. Next year, game on. They're going to be looking at the compounded data together. And, she kept mentioning that sweet spot of the bottom 10%. When you land in the bottom 10%, then you are having to do remediation plans. And they very well may say, you're a level 2, you have to describe your remediation plans. We shall see. But we've all been attending trainings in preparation for that.
Many districts.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And I'm here, not speaking as Peter B. Particularly. I'm speaking myself, and Ms. Newbart will be here, and also Mrs. DeGoff will be here speaking about our elementary program as a whole. Okay. So with that being said, our priorities for the elementary school and what does our data say? What we do is every year we look at our New York State data. with the understanding that we know that that's just a one-time and point-in-time assessment that you give to students. So if that student's having a tough day, or is sick that day, or there's some other situations that may happen, we know that that's like we said before, one-time point in time data point that you can get for students. The other data points that we use, and I'm sure you've heard Dr. Bailey speak about this several times, not only in ELA but also in mathematics as well, is we have what we call our screener assessment. We call it FastBridge. And our screener assessment we give at least 3 times a year, and it gives us an opportunity to see how our students are progressing from a fall to winter to spring. And that is what we gear more towards when we meet as grade levels, as we meet as buildings, our content specialists. We sit down on a monthly basis, to talk about how our students are doing and how they're progressing. And we do it in both areas, both ELA and math. And then we also drill down a little bit further, and at some of our grade levels we have what we call common assessments. And those common assessments have been built based on the New York State standards, and those are assessments that we give to our students. That what we show is that it's middle of the road curriculum that every student should know. And our basis is that when we get that assessment is that 85% of our students should be able to answer that question or pass that assessment. If we see that that's not occurring, that then gives us an opportunity to go back and look and see if the students, if something was missed in the teaching, if it's something that the students didn't understand, but it continues to keep giving us information on how we're doing with our students and our data. And then we drill down even deeper, in which every year Dr. Bailey has talked about as well before, and I know that Mr. Engelhardt has as well too, to talk about our building targets. And we've been doing those for I want to say, I think it's the better part of almost 7 to 8 years, I believe, Dr. Bailey. We've been doing our building targets, in which we set those in ELA, math, and then we set it in a social emotional level as well too. It could be our attendance for our students, and you can see that that's one of the areas that that the state takes a look at, chronic absenteeism, and also too, or how we're doing with our students in terms of behavioral as well too. So those are areas that we do take a look at and what we use for our data on a yearly, monthly, and on a screening level basis. So I'm here to speak to our ELA. And so what does the data say about our students' performance on the state test, as I said before? And what we notice is that the current situation that we're in right now with ELA is that we have no explicit curriculum map for our ELA at this time. Our math has a curriculum map and common assessments as well. What we noticed that we've had some inconsistencies with our reading and intervention. And our journeys, we use our journeys series as a primary source. But we noticed that it was lacking foundational skills, not explicit enough, and we had some issues with teacher buy-in as well too. And we noticed that some of the materials that we were using in Journeys were aging out, and we needed to be able to beef that up. And then also too, in 2017, the next generation standards were adopted too for New York State. And what I can say as well too, let me just keep going. Okay. Oh, this one, okay. All right, and Mrs. Newbart is gonna come in and talk about the math.
I guess I'm concerned that there's no curriculum map for ELA. Is there a reason that's the case?
So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about what the data says, and then we're going to talk about, we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay. So just give us 1 minute. We are going to talk about the curriculum.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. So the math piece, as far as what the data says, what we're seeing, we are getting the scores from various places. As you know, we have the New York State scores. Again, just a quick snapshot in time. Some students are taking them, some students aren't. From what you saw from Ms. Eccles' data, the scores have seen some decline since COVID. for various reasons, obviously. Fastbridge, we've seen inconsistency, but we have seen steadily increasing scores with Fastbridge, which shows us that there is overall growth with students at the elementary level in math. We are currently meeting our building targets that we're setting each year based on our common assessments. So as Mr. Jones just said, we have common assessments at every single grade level in math, at least 3 in every single grade level, some up to 5. And the students are meeting those, the goal that we set for them, which is at least 80% on those common assessments. So we are meeting that annually. And then the other thing we have up there for both ELA and math for what the data says, we are constantly looking at a subgroup focus, specifically in our building level teams, our BLT at the building levels. We're talking a lot this year on our students with disabilities and our economically disadvantaged subgroups, because as you saw in the data, we are really, our numbers are a lot lower there. So we're really taking a look to see what we can do better in those areas.
At those separately and collectively, because your data points are quite different between the two buildings.
So we meet separately, but we're always communicating on what we're doing. And Ms. DeGoff is a great link between the buildings as well.
Your plan of action in each building somewhat different given the scores and the different groups that are struggling?
Our action plan, so our targets are very similar. Our action plans, depending on what the BLTs develop, can be different.
Okay. So these common assessments, what are those? Those are tests that the students take?
The common assessments are tests that they take, and they're developed to be reflective of the New York State standards.
Who develops those?
Teachers.
Within the district?
Mm-hmm.
Are those same tests used across the board for students school-wide or among both schools?
Yes.
Or are they teacher-specific?
No, school-wide.
Okay, so teachers for each
both
grade level
buildings.
will come up with a common assessment
Yes.
test collectively?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we always try to get teachers from both buildings at the same grade level to write those.
Okay. And then that same test is administered to both buildings?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. I think you spoke a little bit. Did you want to talk about the science of reading, please?
Sure. I did want to talk briefly regarding consistency in curriculum, so the map pieces. Can I jump into that real quick, just for Ms. Molino's point? So with Journeys comes a scope and sequence. It's a primary resource. So it's a scope and sequence, which is different than a curriculum map. Curriculum map should be tied specifically to New York State standards. We have been working for the last year and a half on a curriculum map. Okay. So we're starting to roll that out. We could look at resources, but if it's not tied to an end game. So we'll have that in place. And common assessments as well for ELA.
That was my next question.
Yes. Okay. So really the idea around curriculum writing is you need to start with the standard in mind. Then you need to figure out how to assess it. And then you're looking how to get there, starting with the standard and getting to that assessment piece. I did want to mention that, and it's not just specific to RCS, but if you want to Google science of reading versus balanced literacy approach, Ravena RCS has been very much traditional in a balanced literacy approach to ELA. What we're finding and what research is showing us is there has to be much more explicit instruction around reading. And it's really divided the literacy world. Like it's a dateline for like literacy people. Like you
so
could
balanced
you could
literacy
show that.
approach, and what was the other term you used?
Science of reading. Sometimes called structured literacy as well. That's also a term that's been utilized. So what we've been able to do, and for those who have been on the board for a while, if you remember about 5 years ago, many of our students required Wilson reading, which is much more of a science of reading approach. So what we've done is we're able to, through really great reading for K-1-2, follow a science of reading approach. So we're really excited about that, and that's why I think we're seeing some of those gains. So I wanted to say that was a real point-counterpoint discussion in our district for several years regarding, is it balanced literacy, is it science of reading, and really what it is, and many of you have heard this, From pre-K to third grade, you're learning to read, and then from third grade on, you really should be reading to learn. That's the approach that we're going for.
So how does
Yes.
the Really Great Reading program tie into the DRAs that they do for reading levels?
Well, the really great,
Like when I go to my son's conference, they say he's reading on grade level, and
Sure.
it's based on the DRA, which is a reading assessment.
yes.
Are they compatible? Like, how does that?
You'll start seeing with our assessments and kind of like with every assessment and thinking about intervention, you want to triangulate the data. So you want to have multiple assessments to really think about what intervention is best for a student. A DRA is much more holistic in that it's looking at things like fluency, comprehension, writing. Really Great Reading comes with assessments that are much more specific to the skills, the discrete skills for that. So if you don't have a student in K-1-2, then you might not hear about the assessments for Really Great Reading. DRA is much more about getting to that reading level, so that way you could have, so you can think about how to best differentiate the instruction for reading. And so it comes with a Lexile, which they may say your child is reading a such and such, here are some books that they would be appropriate for them.
How long has the district been using Really Great Reading?
This is our first year at a Tier 1,
Okay.
our second year in some of our self-contained skills classrooms, a second year for intervention as well.
Okay.
Fred, that
Yes.
program you mentioned,
Really Great
refresh
Reading.
my memory, did we have some resources that we needed to build up on in teachers' ability to use that program, and we had to get some professional development to kind of get that up and running?
For Really Great Reading, we were able to do a couple of things. We ended up utilizing, and it came out at a perfect time, some of our CARES funds, our ARP funds, because it was designated for learning loss. So it was great for us to be able to purchase those materials. What is great about Really Great Reading, and this is kind of the trend in professional learning, is it's all virtual modules. So we were allowed to give teachers some in-service credit to get that training. In addition to that, we had representation on some of our professional development days to do almost like virtual office hours. So there is something different about having a live person to be able to answer those questions, so we were able to offer both of those things. And for our newer teachers coming in, we have, through My Learning Plan, we're able to offer that as well. So we want to make sure that new teachers coming in get that training. Through our work, and I'm getting ahead of what we're talking about, but through our work with the curriculum writing, we're marrying Really Great Reading to make sure that it's going to fit with the other, within our curriculum map as well.
So do Really Great Reading and Journeys
Journeys
coincide,
is,
or is that for like
Yep.
third and up?
Journeys is aging out. So Journeys is no longer going to be available for us to purchase any of their resources. So that's one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about, is once the resource is gone, we really have to look at what other resources are available. The other thing is, going back to the curriculum map, we have to, regardless of the resource, we have to have the standards in mind. We have to know the standards. So that's a lot of the work that our teachers are doing. All right, I talked too long.
Okay, so I just want to bring attention to the focus of the slide. First of all, potential areas for growth. So that's exciting that we're talking about curriculum and growing. So we're reflective of the data always, and then we look to see how we can proceed. And our teachers have really done a really great job with the curriculum writing in both ELA, math, and also science over the past few years. It does take time though, so I just wanted to mention that. So on to math, consistency in curriculum is one area for growth. So as Mr. Engelhardt just mentioned, due to COVID and also some aging resources, we had Pearson for many years. During COVID, we utilized various resources, online components that were necessary, such as Zern. So now we're at a point where we need to vet resources and get buy-in and hopefully choose a primary resource, so we'll have that consistency in curriculum between both buildings. We're finding that there's some inconsistency, and as everyone knows, if you have something that's very consistent, it leads to better growth, and we're able to assess it better overall and hopefully see some better scores in the long run. The other thing up there is we are noticing a bit of a COVID bubble, specific gaps in learning for more in grades 3 and 4. During the beginning of COVID, those were the students in kindergarten and first grade. So to help address that, the one thing we are using right now for some of those students at Tier 2 is our new Bridges program. That's what we have for math, amongst various other things that teachers are doing in the classroom.
Grade specifically, is that the same cohort that's identified in that 21-22 year? So now they're actually 4th and 5th? What's the, or are you current
So
3rd and 4th?
current 3rd and 4th graders.
Okay, so they wouldn't have even, half of them wouldn't have even been considered in some of the previous data points, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So looking at our priorities at the elementary level, especially focusing in on the ELA part, is that we are looking at or having implemented, and we've done some piloting on this as well too, a integrated curriculum with ELA and social studies through and with common assessments as well, with monitoring our in making revisions to it. I can tell you that I know last year we did some piloting in some classrooms to see how it went. We found some phenomenal responses. What we've learned is that the knowledge base that students bring into the classroom on a daily basis is invaluable. And at the level in which they are able to participate and then make sense of the information they're receiving through ELA and social studies, it showed some really nice responses that we had in implementing that. So we're looking forward to continue to keep pushing in that area. Also too, just like Mr. Engelhardt said too, for ELA as well, we talked about the really great reading. Like I said, is demonstrating some success with our K2 students on their phonological skills. With that being said too, we noticed that we also, you may hear it also as well too at the middle level, saying that we need to continue to keep honing those skills for our students as well, to make sure that those foundational skills, or you may hear the term phonological skills, the students are doing well, which help them in their reading, which then goes back to what Ms. Molino was saying in regards to the DRAs, because it is a more holistic approach to students. If you understand the letter sounds, you can then read the word easier, you can then read the sentence faster. It just builds one upon the other. So, also too, a teacher task force has been put together as well, working with BOCES for almost 2 years on creating a curriculum map that hit the social studies practices while also including the next generation ELA standards. And I'm sure you may have heard of the next gen standards. Like I said before, it's a really positive thing. The state keeps moving the goalposts, and that's exactly what they'll keep telling you. So you're just not 10 yards isn't going to be the same 10 yards that you had last year. You're going to get, it's going to be a 110-yard field now. So it's going to get a little bit more, arduous for you to be able to continue to keep making that progress. And that's what we should be striving for in all schools, is to continue to keep building and getting better on a yearly basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Noble to talk about our math program.
Okay, so actions to improve for math. We would like to reconvene propose to reconvene the math task force, which we've had in the past. That's basically a group of mainly teachers to examine our math programs that are out there, to institute one common elementary resource that I just spoke about. Providing PD opportunities and training for staff for effective implementation of any resource that we bring on board. That's so important, so our teachers know exactly what the new program would be for the students. And then setting more rigorous building targets. So we are always aiming higher every single year. Yes.
As far as always moving forward and the state moving the goalposts, didn't the state just move the goalposts backwards? They moved the new norm for the scores backwards to what just occurred. So going forward, are we going to operate at the same consistency we're operating? Like, those numbers are lower The new norm numbers are lower. So when a student is at grade level, it's not going to mean the same thing. So are we teaching to that new norm, or are we teaching to the norm that we've been teaching to all along?
So again, I'll speak for me for a minute, I think, but I can speak for both of us. That's the state scores, the state tests, you know, that data point. We have so many other measures that we use all the time, and we look at data all the time, so many different ways. So we are building targets and looking at data in many different ways. So in short, no, because we're meeting goals and we're setting goals to always reach higher every year. So for example, with the math, right now, we're at 80% on the common assessments. We need to rewrite the common assessments to make them more rigorous and reach higher. So regardless of what the state, you know, where those goalposts are, we always want to do better.
I think the challenge when we hear internal versus against the global is we don't know what we don't know that we base the local on. So, you know, anybody who's played with data knows that you can paint the picture on particular pieces. We just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence and holding accountable. I understand the state tests are not perfect. That doesn't help us paint an accurate picture, but I get worried when we only rely heavily or put our weight behind what we can control locally. So I think somewhere if we could have some data points that show us what makes up that common assessment, like what those weighted concepts are or what it is that makes that valuable compared to a different number that we're seeing at the statewide level, so that we can put behind us the faith that the localized test is meeting those goals and those measures you want.
Okay. We certainly have some data we can share with you.
The other thing worth noting, to Tina's question, the goalposts will be moving for every school district. So, as Debbie said, internally we will continue to try and be more rigorous and achieve higher. But as far as these results, the accountability ratings, we're still going to be in the same boat. Whether they move the bar for proficiency up or down, we have to be as high as we can compared to all other schools in New York State. And if they move the goalpost and set a rate, you needed a 50 before, now you need a 40, we're still competing with the same schools, you know, on the same, at least it's on the same rubric. So that will also be a good indicator for us.
Before we leave that, what is the participation rate on the state tests versus the common assessments in the elementary schools?
Common assessments would be 100%.
They are 100%.
That is given in the class.
Yep.
As part of the class. It's like a unit test, basically.
Yep. And that would be the same for ELA when those are fully implemented?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to share some additional data from the Student Support Office. So what you see in front of you at the elementary level last year for the 21-22 school year, we've seen a rise in referrals to special education. Last year, we had a total of 64 referrals at the elementary level and 84 referrals overall district-wide. You know, it's our responsibility through Child Find, which is an IDEA provision, to ensure that we are identifying those students who are at risk and may have a disability. However, at the same time, it is also our responsibility to make sure that we're not misidentifying students as students with disabilities. You know, when their underperformance could really be caused by some other contributing factor, such as not having access to quality Tier 1 instruction, lack of access to targeted interventions, chronic absenteeism, or difficulties that are a result of environmental, cultural, or a language disadvantage. We also have a Board of Ed policy that requires pre-referral interventions prior to referral, and there are specific requirements around eligibility criteria at the elementary level for students who are struggling academically and being considered for a learning disability classification. And this requirement is the implementation of targeted interventions that increase with intensity over time to be able to show us whether or not there's a pattern of inadequate progress despite those interventions that are put in place. The lower portion of this slide shows our current classification rates at the elementary level. Overall, district-wide, our classification rate is around 20%. It's a very fluid number. We've had 26 students transfer in this school year alone that have IEPs, so that can substantially, shift our number. But from year to year, the past 2 to 3 years, we've been right around 18, 19, 20%. So you can see that at some grade levels, we have classification rates ranging from 19 to 27%. This is very high. So this possible over-identification is an indicator that our Tier 1 instruction and/or our RTI and MTSS model may be lacking. So Ms. Tebow is going to share next, and she's going to share some of our proposed actions, which we believe will allow us to be more accurate in identifying students in need of special education support moving forward.
Why are those referrals so much lower?
So,
across the board?
yeah, just to mention this year, so I think there's a lot of reasons why we had more referrals last school year. It was our first school year that we really came back after COVID. So I think there was a lot of hesitation, and when you saw students struggling, oftentimes teachers or parents would refer and want as much help, of course, as we can provide for their students. So we saw a lot of referrals because of that. However, like I said, Ms. Tebow's going to speak to the RTI and MTSS process. We really need to ensure that we're utilizing the right track and providing our students with, exhausting all the general education supports and quality Tier 1 instruction and interventions prior to looking to referral for special education. And you'll see the 22, 23 referrals, just as a frame of reference. We are moving in the right direction for a few reasons. We've started SBST this year and MTSS, and as I mentioned, I don't want to say too much. Ms. Tebow's going to take it over and share some more, okay? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Tebow. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Support Services, as Colleen mentioned, and the CPSE and CSE chairperson for the district as well. So I just want to mention that all of the efforts at the building level that Mrs. Newbart and Mr. Jones were talking about really help us to improve how we function as a department at the Office of Student Support. As Colleen mentioned, it is the responsibility of the Committee on Special Education to ensure that all students have received and continue to receive high-quality Tier 1 standards-aligned curriculum, as well as RTI, or Response to Intervention supports, MTSS supports, as general education students prior to being referred to the Committee on Special Education. So also, as Colleen mentioned, under Child Find, IDA requires the Committee on Special Education to develop and implement an effective method of determining which students should receive special education and those that are not, simply lacking an adequate instruction. So that's something I think on a whole, as a leadership team, we've really put a focus on since I started in this position a year and a half ago, a laser focus on it collectively. And so an exciting development this year that's happened in all buildings is the development of the SBST, or School-Based Support Team, this year. And the buildings have done a fabulous job of...
Just gotta go to the next slide.
Oh, I'm not on my slide, I'm sorry.
Right.
Thank you. This has allowed teachers to that have struggling students that may or may not already be in the RTI, receiving RTI supports. They can make that referral to the team, and this is a multidisciplinary team of staff who focus on identifying the root causes of a student struggles. And they work together to identify potential supports and strategies that might not have been considered in RTI. And I've been consulting with the team and have sat in on a couple of meetings, as well as sometimes I'll have a separate meeting with an RTI teacher, and I'm just astounded at the wonderful efforts that everyone is making to ensure that students are really receiving high quality RTI support. And overall, it is our hope that the growth of our district's Tier 1 MTSS and SBST teams will both ensure students receive the high-quality instruction they need and improve the referral and identification process for the Committee on Special Education. So when those, things are properly working and in place, it helps us to do our job in properly identifying students with disabilities. And overall, just a side note, our identification rate of students with disabilities in the district peaked in 2019 and 2020 with 18% of our students overall identified. And we are on a slight downward trend, actually, closer to 17% in the last year, but we still are above the national average of about 15%, just to give you a little idea of where we are. And we want to continue to put a focus on improving the quality of our special education. This year we've expanded our special education programs, going along with the Tier 1 instruction and the really great reading, and the Tier 2 instruction and really great reading that was developed last year. We also developed a new special education program to include a specialized reading class that provides focused and targeted instruction to students with significant decoding challenges. So those students that have 2 or more years in their reading abilities, that gap, they receive a very targeted, small group instruction with really great reading. And the feedback from the teachers is very positive. Recently I did a survey, and I think 100% of the teachers said that they're really seeing an impact on overall phonemic awareness, improvement, and decoding abilities in their students. So building these common practices and routines and language between general education and special education and RTI interventionists has been, I think, really important in the overall development. And I think we're headed to see good things in the overall reading scores at RCS. Our monthly, also, I think I didn't mention about the professional development as well. Some of the teaching assistants have also reached out to our department to say, we want to be able to provide some reading support to students as well. So a lot of people, I think, are just with that common language, they're really jumping on to, make that collective effort to want to improve the reading scores of our students. I also want to mention another area of professional development we've been working on this year. We have been working with Chelsea Place psychologists. They visit our schools monthly and provide embedded professional development for teams of staff that work in our special class settings. They've been wonderful resources and have conducted classroom visits, consultation, and after-school in-service sessions on instructional supports for students with autism and positive strategies for working with students that have social, emotional, and behavioral needs. So we plan to continue that support as well. That embedded professional development and consultation has been a wonderful support to our staff this year.
Is that only to the classrooms that are self-contained, or is it to?
For the most part, that's where we're seeing most of the need. It varies from month to month, so I kind of keep track throughout the month where we're seeing an uptick in areas of need or professional development in a certain targeted area, and then I provide them with a schedule to go and visit the teachers for those students that have that specific area of need that month. And then also in next school year, with the hiring of an early childhood school psychologist, we'll be able to provide more of my oversight and consultation and support to the elementary special education staff as well. And also I know that the TABA unit is also working on developing their own training modules. We're thinking about their professional development as well, not only in reading, but in the onboarding of staff when they join us, so that they can have some readily available professional development as well, so they can hit the ground running with positive supports to our most needy students. And overall, we're committed to ensuring that students with disabilities are provided with the support they need in order to achieve alongside their peers by providing high-quality professional development to our staff. Any questions from anyone? Thank you.
Okay, I want to take a breath for a second. We are more than halfway done. I wanted to talk about it in context of time and content that we're hearing tonight. At our next board meeting, we have 3 things happening. We have meet the candidates. There are 4 candidates that will be, they have 3 minutes to speak, so figure that will be 15 minutes with candidates. We have awards for our attendance posters, which would be less than 5 minutes. There's maybe 6 to 5 kids, 5 students who will be receiving awards, which will take less than 5 minutes. And we have the budget hearing, which is required by law. It is basically the 12-slide summary of what you're going to see in the budget newsletter when it comes out. And a pretty fast presentation. It's things that we've already discussed, which is 10 minutes. So the question I have for the board, so what I just talked about is about 25 minutes of content added to our regular board meeting. If the board would like us to continue, finish middle school and high school, we can delay one or both of them until the May 3rd meeting, knowing that we have the other things to do that night as well. So I ask, what's your preference?
We're here, the information's here, everybody else is here. Keep going.
Thank you.
I'm back. So we're going to look at the same data for the middle school that we looked at the elementary. Middle and elementary schools calculations are the same. So there's just a couple of things here that I do want to mention before we start talking about the actual data. One is I didn't really go into chronic absenteeism. I think everyone's pretty familiar with that term, but I just want to clarify from the state's perspective, this is calculated, it's any student who is enrolled for at least 10 instructional days. So if we have a student who comes and then leaves us, they still are in our accountability system for this particular measure. It's the only measure where we have a partial we could have students that have already left us being included. And it is that they are absent for 10% or more of those days. So that student who comes and is here for 10 days and then transfers elsewhere, if they're out 1 day, they are considered chronically absent. For most students who are here for 180 days, the threshold is 18 to be chronically absent. So it's about 2 a month, 2 days a month, which is really, when you think about it, it doesn't feel like that much. It is significant. They use that number because the research shows that that is kind of the threshold for students being able to be successful. But I just want you to be aware that it's not a huge number. The other change here, or the other addition that I want to say, is that for 8th grade students who take a Regents exam, that Regents exam can be included in place of the 3 through 8 assessment that they do not take. So if they take algebra or earth science in our 8th grade, they would use that score instead of, because they do not take the 8th grade science or the 8th grade math tests. So the state has allowed us to substitute that in. We don't do it, they do it, but those students do count for us. Sometimes people wonder. So what you'll see here is that, again, remember these numbers are the state percentile. That's how we compare to other schools across the state. So you'll see that here at the middle school, we do have some concerns, some areas for growth. One of the things that was asked previously is, are we on a list? Are we designated? At this point, we are not, and you may be wondering why. The list is because the designation of a CSI or a TSI is if you are in the bottom 10%. However, they start from the very bottom and they count up. They are required to provide or to designate a certain percentage. I believe it's 5%. So if we are higher than the bottom 5% of the state for an overall measure, so each one of these individually doesn't count, it gets combined into a bigger picture, then we would be on a targeted school improvement plan. You'll see at the bottom, I did put a little asterisk there for students with disabilities. Currently, we're on what's called a potential targeted school, which means that if our performance in that particular area does not improve next year, that we could be on a list. Yes, or improve slow. Well, I mean, yeah, so basically if we're in that bottom first percentile again, for students with disabilities, first and second, that could put us on a targeted list, which then means that we go through a process of creating an improvement plan, which is what Mr. Engelhardt, Ms. Capice, and I attended some workshops on what that looks like, so we do have a good understanding of it. I will say that in 2018-19, we were on the same kind of watch list for 3 other areas that we are no longer, right? So we kind of went up in some areas and down in others. So there's always that fluctuation, but it is something to be aware of. Yes, go ahead.
Is you can make all the improvement plan you want in the middle school, but 2/3 of these kids are going to be in the high school after this year.
Right.
So what are we doing in the high school for these kids? Because these kids that were in 8th grade in this year are already freshmen.
Yeah.
And then next year, we'll have the 8th graders, the 7th and 8th on this data. So, I mean, doing things in the middle school, what are we doing with these kids in the high school? Because we're sending these kids that need help and at risk.
Is at risk.
Now our high school's working on it. So I guess that's the question of how are we dealing with that?
Sure. So I will say that, well, we've been working specifically at the middle school, kind of looking at this data. That this doesn't happen in isolation. All of the leaders, we always look at this data as a whole. You know, it's not just our middle school and high school, but also our elementary schools, right? How does that information, or how do those students coming up through, you know, lead to this? So there is a lot of collaboration between our buildings. You see it here tonight. You'll hear people talk about things in common. You'll hear us talk about how we're building programs that are going to help all students throughout the district. But I do think it's important, to your point, to be aware of this and make sure that we're not dropping the ball at any level. So,
Well, I guess the question I have is all these data points, and we're looking at these numbers and everything, is how are the programs we already have in place working? You know, so they're not like we talked about, and we'll get to high school and the middle school, and in past years we've talked about Operation Graduation and the resource room and all of these things that we've put a lot of money into programs.
Other resources.
Right, and others. There's more than just those. They aren't working because the numbers are going down. So what are we doing to help these programs, or what new programs? Like, I mean, I don't want to sit here for 2 more hours and go through data. I want to know what we're doing to fix, you know, some of these things.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Capece and Mr. Doran, because that's exactly what they're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on what Teddy said, this kind of goes for the whole presentation. I know it's incredibly valuable data, and it's fresh on all of your minds, but I think when we hear the interventions that will be offered, it's done in a way that's very optimistic and cheerleading and hopeful, and that's great. But I think we need to realistically look at what has been done and describe why they didn't work, or what things do and what things we need to abandon. Why? So it's much more of the hows and the whys than just guessing going forward. And I'm not minimizing by saying guessing, but we're speculating that the next intervention will be better than the last. What are we basing that on?
Yeah, the fix is important. It's the problem that we need to identify. Because if you heard me shuffling my pages and tearing things over here, it's because that was alarming when I saw it, and I wanted to see it next to the elementary data. What is causing this drop-off? When we go from 64% weighted average at AW Becker to 16th percentile in the middle school, and then we get into the high school, we're still at 16. So there's a cliff coming out of the elementary schools into the middle school, and we can talk about the fixes, but what are we fixing? What is the problem? What is causing this drop-off? That is an alarming number.
It is. And granted, I hold myself to the same accountability I've said already, that we're held to the same standard as every other school. But if you did the math backward to 2019, the kids in the middle school correspond to, as Fred said, in grades K through 2, you learn to read, and in grades 3 and onward, you read to learn. Those kids were in that key core content grade 3, 4, and 5 when the pandemic began, and all bets were off as far as the fidelity or the way that we were offering the ways that we usually do. I'm not blaming the pandemic, because as I said, every school
went through.
was held to the same rubric. I'm just identifying why something calamitous may have happened. Also, I think all of us would agree the complexity of the content and assessments continues to go up as you enter 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And the farther you are from not having learned the foundational stuff,
Yeah.
it becomes compounding. Problem becomes compounding. So, and I know you had asked about, you'll hear the middle school and high school talk about our intervention programs, those specifically GROW program at the middle school, Operation Graduation, and resource rooms. The percentage of students that are being addressed by that tier 2 or 3 intervention is minuscule compared to the total number of students who fail to perform at grade level. And I promised all of them something special if they continue to say, quality tier 1 instruction for every student, every day, in every classroom. Teaching with continuity to the curriculum, to New York State standards, and doing it with enriching, engaging, meaningful content and instructional strategies. Every student. What we're seeing, the only explanation for what we're seeing is we need it in every classroom every day. The other things need to work. I mean, there's no question the interventions that are 2 and 3 need to work, but we see this as a major, and we've major intervention district-wide. We have great people who are skilled and are trained, and we need to all pull in the same direction. You've heard the elementary talk about it. Content that's aligned, every classroom gets the same content and are measured the same way. We need to do it all the way to grade 12 with continuity. That's the measure, that's the thing I think that we believe is going to make the greatest intervention. So let's let the middle school go through what they have to present, and we can continue the conversation.
We can do that, but what this screams to me, just looking at this from an outsider, is culture, environment. We have the elementary schools that are performing at an acceptable level. I would love to see Peter B. more at the AWB level, so whatever's working in AWB, let's make sure that we expand that. But when we see this precipitous and consistent drop-off that begins at middle school and completes all the way through the high school, to me, I'm asking myself, what's happening in these buildings? Is it environmental? Is it cultural? Is it behavioral? Is it lack of discipline? What's happening beyond academic interventions that's contributing to this? Because it's more, I think, than talking about academic interventions and common assessments.
And here you go. Both the middle school and high school are going to address those things beyond instruction in the classroom.
Okay.
I do just want to remind you that that first row, that weighted achievement, reflects our refusal rate, which at the middle school is much higher than at our elementary schools. So there still is a big gap. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of concerning stuff here, but just remember that part of that huge drop, if you're looking at the weighted average achievement, could be attributed to some of the refusal rate.
Well, we should have data on where we compare against other schools for that number, right?
Yes, and I mean, I could give you data for days,
Right.
so.
But I mean, when we make that as a reasoning,
Yeah.
we should very easily be able to balance it with
Yeah.
that supports that theory.
Yeah, and our buildings have that data, and we've talked about that specifically at building leadership teams, but it's not here.
I think one of the things that jumps out at me is we've been struggling for 2-3 years with the idea of this chronic absenteeism and that being such a major driver for, disparities between the students, but that conflicts with that information when we're seeing such drastic numbers, but the chronic absenteeism in that same column of students is pretty strong. I mean, we seem to be doing okay in that area. So, to the layperson, you'd say that it's almost contradictory.
Well, keep in mind that last year was not good for anybody, right? So absenteeism rates across the state last year were outrageous. Like when we're looking at, we might have been at the 57th percentile, but that was not good. So I think what's happening is what we're looking at is the difference between, a calculation that is very big and broad versus individual student performance based on the fact that they're out 20, 30, 40 days in a year. But I do want to turn it over to them so they can talk about what they plan to do.
Good evening, everyone. I think we would all agree, based on that last slide, that there are numbers that are certainly concerning. And I think we spoke going into this school year, and what would, as simple as it sounds, what would branch into a lot of our academic programs is attendance and just having the kids in school. Last year, at the middle school, we had a 25% chronic absentee rate, and I know Carol went into the specifics that it's roughly 18 days. That also includes excused and unexcused absences. So our goal was to quarterly to kind of get it to decrease, and hopefully by the end of the school year we're down to 17%. So quarter 3 ends in a few days, so you only have quarter 1 and quarter 2 up there. So we have broken it down by grade levels, but looking down at the bottom, that's kind of where we are at this point. So at the end of quarter 2, we had 87 days of school. We had 74 students with 8 or more absences, which gave us a 19% chronic absentee rate. So we are making progress in that area. We are consistently working hard. We have a attendance committee at the middle school that meets on a bi-weekly basis, and it consists of not only myself, our school counselors, our guidance counselors, our psychologists. We are doing everything that we can. We have, again, we're making progress. We have 74 kids at the end of quarter 2, 8 or more absences. I kind of did a quick little dive at the end of last week into what it would look like for quarter 3. It did increase a little bit, to be 100% honest. We're back into about 20 to 21% chronic absentee rate. So hopefully at the end of the school year here, we've gotten through this last break. We will consistently make that effort into being persistent, getting to families, and making sure that they know that attendance matters. As it says outside on the RCS sign, attendance does matter. We need students here, and hopefully, if we can continue to decrease that chronic absentee rate, it branches into increasing a lot of our academic programming and our performance overall.
Is that 8 absences? So, does that mean they're going to have 16 for the end of the year? Does the number go up?
So it was the eight at the bottom there. So 87 days of school. 10% of 87 was 8. I rounded down instead of rounding up.
So they missed 10% of school.
They did.
So our goal is to have them miss less than 10% of school.
Correct.
Is that what the absentee rate is?
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, it's a persistent effort. We have probably a team of 8 to 10 people. Like I said, we meet on a bi-weekly basis. We are making home visits. We are sending out our letters. We are, if need be, we are putting in pins for a truancy. We are calling CPS. We are getting parents in. Anything that we have to do. There are some students and some families that are much harder to reach and harder to get into our building than others, and doesn't mean we're going to stop though. So that's kind of where we are for our.
Do we know how many of these chronically absent students have opted out of the state tests?
We could get that. I don't know it offhand, but we could get that.
I'm just not sure that driving attendance is necessarily going to impact test scores.
How many of those kids who haven't been in school opt in to take the test?
Well, we did have a homeschool student.
Well, either way, because that's going to skew this difference between the weighted average and the core subject performance, right? Because that accounts for people who haven't taken the test. If we're saying that we need to focus on the students who are chronically absent, get them past that threshold, so they're still going to be absent, maybe not chronically absent. Now we have more test takers. That's not necessarily going to reflect better scoring.
We also do have a window in which we can get them to test. So if they don't show up on test day and they do show up after testing they think is done, we can get them to test. So we do catch up with some of them, but to your point, we do miss some because they're chronically absent.
Yeah.
So next we're going to take a look at our second goal, building goal. And you'll see, as with the other slides, we have some work to do. In our first quarter, we had nearly 1/4 of our students who were in the danger of failing category.
So this particular goal, we're looking at students who are between 65 and 75%. Again, in the first quarter, nearly a quarter of our students were in that category. And I broke it down also by students who have an IEP, the gen ed students, and students with a 504. In the first quarter, students who are actually failing, there were 21 students who were actually failing one or more courses, which was 5% of our population. In quarter two, unfortunately, we went up a little bit, and about a third of our students are now in that danger of failing category. More gen ed students are in that category, less of the IEP students, a little less of the 504 students. Unfortunately, the actual number of students who are failing one or more courses also went up to 42, and we increased to 11%. Obviously, we need to do some work there.
So that speaks to having better interventions for your IEP and 504 students. that are
Gen ed as well.
Didn't you s-
Well, gen ed
Gen ed
went
went up.
As in, there's more students who are in that in danger of failing category.
A lot more.
Correct.
I think what she's saying is that you already have better interventions for IEP, which is why their numbers are
Right.
What, the gen ed and the IEP numbers got better. I'm not, sorry, not the gen ed, the IEP and the 504 numbers got better, the gen ed number got considerably worse.
Correct.
Can I ask a question? What is the enrollment for the middle school?
We hover around a 400, 398, 400, somewhere around there.
1/4 of the students are failing one or more class?
That is their, this one is they're in danger of failing.
30.
So they're between 65 and 75. So yeah, 1/4 of our students and 1/3 of them in the second quarter were in danger of failing.
55 is considered passing?
Pardon me?
55 is
65.
65.
65 is,
75, between that.
but if you look at the last line there, so the number of students who are actually failing one or more courses, 21 of them, 5%. Still not great. I'd like to see that at 0.
Is there a reason
Yeah,
that, I guess the gen ed number is just sticking out at me like a sore thumb between quarter one and quarter two. Is there a reason for that? Was chronic absenteeism up for more gen ed kids? I'm just trying to grasp that number.
Did we break that down on the last one between gen ed and, I don't think we did. Well, we can get that to you. I'm not sure.
I guess what I'm asking, I'm not being clear. I'm asking, have you come up with a reason or an explanation as to why that occurred?
My guess is that in the first quarter, it's a lot of review from the previous year. Second quarter tends to get a little more difficult. And with the identified kids, those teachers really got on it and made sure those students were doing what they needed to do. But obviously, we have some work to do. Our gen ed students need some help as well.
Are families being notified appropriately? Of these
They absolutely are. Well, they have School Tool where they can go in there, but I also send an individual email to every family who is failing one or more courses.
What about students who are at danger of failing?
I didn't do it in that category, but I certainly can. I don't get a lot of great responses from it, by the way.
That would be the next question is, are you getting any kind of response, and do we need to actually pick up the phone or try to get them into school or, to the next step of intervention? I mean, if you send an email and get no response, then, it doesn't get us anywhere.
Right, our councils also call, but I think may need to call for myself or Steve as well. Get the parents in.
What is the remedy that they're offered to help their student that's struggling? Are they encouraged to or required to stay 10th period with the teachers of the subject they're failing, or is there a homework club option at the middle school level?
We do both of those.
Are they required to attend those things if they're in this category?
We do require it. We have a lot of students who absolutely refuse. We have parents who refuse to allow their students to stay 10th period. So there's that battle as well.
So it sounds like some parent education would be...
Well, you have to get them to involve before you
Correct.
educate.
No, correct, I agree, but that seems like it may be...
We've talked about that plenty of times.
Are the teachers, so before it gets to the administration to make these notifications, are teachers in contact with parents? Is there
They are.
an expectation? Is there some standard that we put up to teachers saying, here's when and what you should do to make contact with families?
I love that question. That is awesome. Because we ask the teachers, before they're allowed to send home a failing grade for the quarter, they're required to make contact with a parent.
And each grade level does have a mandatory 10th period list that we have access to, that they've taken care of all of that themselves, and they bring us, we're always in the bullpen ready to go, but they bring us in when needed. If we have to get parents into the building, that's when they get a hold of us.
But again, we have some parents who are refusing to allow their children to stay after, or their children do stay after and they make a phone call, oh, I need to come home, and they come pick them up. It boggles my mind. But it's just like you said, parent education, we need to work on that as well.
Well, parent involvement, I guess, would.
Yeah. I guess I'm kind of confused by if 10th period is still part of the school day, and that's taught to them from middle school on, and they're required to stay, is there a consequence for not staying, regardless of the parent?
The consequence would be staying for 10th period. That's the tough part.
Well, but we have a graduated response system, and nobody wants to penalize a kid because of academics. I get that, but there's got to be a consequence for poor choice making, and that's the part that I'm curious about.
If there is a student that is scheduled to stay with the teacher, they are either on the mandatory schedule or they have made an arrangement prior to 10th period and they don't, they will get a referral that we will handle, and then it is assigned by us. And then if they don't go again, it just gets even worse from there.
Okay.
We could assign them to extended detention or multiple 10th periods, or we have even picked them up at the end of 9th period and walked them to 10th period.
That becomes difficult if it's the parent that's choosing not to make.
Agreed.
I mean, it's hard to further discipline the student when the parent is the one that's saying that they can't stay. So
It does make it difficult.
I hear your pain. That makes it difficult.
Makes it very difficult. Before we move on from that slide, I just want to point out one more thing. Notice that in parentheses there that we factored out the students who are chronically absent. So if you put those back in there, these numbers would be a little higher. Okay, so I thought it would be important for you to take a look at this slide here, focusing on students who actually failed 2 or more courses by quarter. And again, the third quarter hasn't ended yet, so we looked at the 5-week mark just to give you a general guess. So in the first quarter, we had 15 students who failed 2 or more classes, and then we broke it down by subgroups. Similar to the elementary schools, which I was watching those slides, our students with disabilities and our students who are economically disadvantaged seem to be our major target areas that we need to focus on. However, you'll see in another couple slides, we hope to focus on, and we plan to focus on all students, not just those 2 subgroups. But looking at the second quarter, unfortunately, again, we increased to 23 students who are failing 2 or more classes. You can skip this one too. Skip that one too. Okay. So, what do we plan to do at the middle school? So again, as Dr. Bailey and other people are saying, we want to provide high-quality Tier 1 instruction. We really need to focus on that and really look at what are we actually doing at the Tier 1 level and work on that with our teachers. We want to build AIS into our schedule, and I'm not talking just about the 2 reading teachers we have or the 1 math teacher we have. I'm talking about as many teachers as I possibly can. I want it in their schedule for them to provide AIS in their subject area. So we're looking at that. Not only do we want to do that, but we want to identify areas of need to provide specific targeted interventions for every child in that building. I think the students who are at our top end and the students at our low end, every child in that building should show growth every year. There should not be one child that doesn't show growth. One of the possible problematic areas is what tool are we going to use? Like the elementary school, we use FastBridge as just a identifying tool, but it doesn't really give us really good specific information of why the students in what specific areas are making them score where they're scoring. Like, I want to know, is it decoding? Is it comprehension? Is it, fluency? What is it that's making them score where they are? Then on top of that, I would like to do quarterly progress monitoring to make sure that we are making progress with all of these students. And again, it's another problematic area. I don't know exactly what tool we're going to use. I'm hoping to get some of my teachers to apply for some curriculum time this summer to work on that with me. Planning for summer school in summer 2024, we'd like to go back to our old model of a full-on summer school. One of the things we're consistently seeing with some of the students in the middle school is some of them feel that it doesn't matter, that they're just going to pass on to the high school. We'd like to put that accountability back in there for these students. So, any questions on our proposed actions?
So the question is, provide high-quality Tier 1 instruction.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the theme.
It is.
What are we going to do different? Isn't that what we're doing every day now?
What
are we-
differentiates between what we are doing and making it high quality? And that's not really aimed at you, that's kind of aimed at the whole team.
Well, one of the things I think of is, again, looking at specifically what is it the students in a gen ed math class, what those students, what are their problematic areas? And that teachers should be teaching to those problematic areas. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in.
One of the things that we've been working on in all, but specifically secondary as well, is that Tier 1 includes differentiation. So we think differentiation means that it would be Tier 2, but really Tier 1 includes differentiation. So we're looking at instruction at Tier 1 level to say, okay, you have 40 minutes, and we've been talking even about periods and what periods look like as well to make sure that we have quality time. But to be able to hit standards, it goes back to hitting those standards that we're supposed to, but then you need to differentiate for those students. One of the things that we have included in the budget for this year is additional instructional coaching from BOCES. So right now we have an instructional coach that's working with our elementary teachers where they can go in, they can meet with teachers, they can coach. We have a lot of newer teachers as well. So we are looking at increasing our instructional coaching K-12 to make sure that we have those opportunities for newer teachers, teachers who might want to look at, because standards are changing or have changed, to make sure that we're hitting those standards as well. So the other thing that we're asking principals to do is do more instructional walkthroughs as well. We started that this year, so not just APPR, which is teacher evaluation, but also bopping into classrooms more to look at instruction. And then also we're in a new cycle for curriculum content specialists as well, and we really want our curriculum content specialists, we've been encouraging them, and this will be much more of an accountability piece as having them become more of that instructional leader within classrooms as well. So getting people into classrooms, really supporting teachers, especially those that need it.
Can we have the curriculum content specialists report out on this, what's happening in the schools? I feel like maybe we're missing some of the picture here as to what's working and what's not working. I would think it
They are going to report out tomorrow, but we can have them for our CNI meeting.
Okay.
That's one of the things that we had talked about as having them do. But if you want to, based off of that, for those who are on the CNI committee, if you want them to report out to the general.
No, yeah,
I guess, my question is, we're doing these things, so we're having more walkthroughs from administrators. We have CNI, we're doing all these things. Our numbers are getting worse. We're in the third quarter and the numbers aren't any better. Like, what are we doing now? I guess I'm looking at this year alone with, grades. What are we doing for the kids? These are 8th graders that are going to the high school next year. The numbers in the third quarter down here are the same halfway through as they were in the second quarter.
And they're 6th and 7th graders.
Like we're in the third quarter. If we're doing all these things, nothing's working.
How do we?
So I guess I'm just trying to see of what else we need to do. As a board, we're here. What do we need to do as a board to support staff to, what tools do you need? I'm not going into walkthrough school to see what kids are doing, and I'm not the person that's going to tell you how to do it. I have no idea. But what do you need from the board level to improve instruction? That's, I guess, what I'm looking at.
We're 80% of the way through. I told them to be brutally honest, so it's working. One of the hardest things that I think we do on an annual basis is have to react to data that is more than a year old frequently. But what you're talking about, Teddy, isn't the state data. You're talking about our local data. What can the board do on an ongoing basis is, I was, without having to talk to Fred, or not talking to Fred, C&I spends a lot of time talking about components of program and our curricular, our textbook purchases sometimes, and curricular work that they're doing. I think that we need to, at every level, establish clear benchmarks that are important to us. They need to be measured on whatever the cycle is for C&I. We'll call it, at minimum, a quarterly basis, and the data of progress on a specific target. It's very hard to do, like holistic, like we're going to improve everyone's score on the 8th grade science assessment. It needs to be a little bit more compartmentalized, but those targets and benchmarks need to be reported out on a minimum of a quarterly basis, or at the very least at the C&I meetings. And then that can be brought to the board. We need to see that progress. What doesn't happen right now, it's not a detractor of the people that are standing here, is you've seen PBIS initiatives. Your kids have been through school and you've seen PBIS initiatives. You might have seen like math contest initiatives. Peter B. has these great murals on the wall. Becker always has these great bulletin boards of student progress on a math measurement or ELA measurement. We need to make it loud, and we need to make it noisy, and the accountability needs to be shared with our community, and all of us need to pull together. And if what we've done is, this is a lot of new information. For some of you that have been here for many years even, this is new information. We're being very blunt about sharing out where we're failing, but it needs to be much more obvious every day. It can't wait until our board meeting in May or April. It can't wait until June. It can't wait until the state test. So what I'm telling you is that one resolution that we believe is important is to make the data publicly available. Our community can see whether we are succeeding or failing. And there's a level of accountability with that. We're a huge investment in our community. $53 million we're asking for our taxpayers to do this work. If they were buying a car and 1% of the, percentile of the cars, 1% of the cars made it past the first 10 miles, we would be out of business. So we need to be accountable to our customers. So I think being more open and honest about our targets and what we're trying to do will be helpful for all of us. A sense of urgency about what we need to do. And you have been left unurgent. I mean, just because of maybe not having the right information, but every one of us, the leaders, the teachers, the support staff in the buildings, and the board, we need to feel a sense of urgency about it, and we need to be public about our progress and how we're doing. It'll make a world of difference. And it's not like we've tried to be private. It's just that we have internal conversations. We have grade level meetings and department meetings and building meetings. Talk about it internally, and then everyone goes back and does their work, successfully or unsuccessfully. If we're telling our story and there's no place to hide, I think all of us will feel a greater sense of urgency, and we're not afraid to do that.
Yeah.
Does the middle school still do teams? Like, I remember in the old days there were like space shuttles and planets and...
6th grade only with any comprehensiveness, and the biggest reason is we're just wrong sized to get balanced teams, because there just aren't enough sections to do 4 and 4 or 3 and 3.
I only bring it up because I remember when we'd come in for a parent conference, we were able to sit with that entire team.
Right.
And for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you were able to get, the family was able to hear from each of those teachers the pros and the cons. And if your student wasn't a great math student, you were able to balance it out with the other teacher who said, this is what works for us in this. And I feel like the team approach, and I might just be kind of spitballing, but it gave a little bit more holistic look at what your student needed at that point in time. Doesn't mean it's the same thing a year from then, but at least you knew that there was kind of an undivided attention on that student and what was working and what wasn't working for them. Yeah. I don't know if there's something to substitute that.
The middle school has worked for eons on common planning time for different groups of teachers to try and collaborate and do that. It is very helpful to unite.
Well, especially developmentally, right? They're coming out of the elementary school at completely different stages of strength and development. And that team followed you for that year or possibly 2 to give you that perspective also. We've seen emotional growth in them. We've seen this citizenship with them. And so you really were able to get the best of the best, but while still being honest about these are the things they're struggling with. So I don't know.
The biggest reason, and Denise can probably help explain it, the mystery around it is a sixth grade teacher is an elementary teacher. They can teach any subject. So we have a team of 4 and 2, right?
We have 4 and 4 right now.
4 and 4 right now. And as you get to the upper grades, class sizes are a little larger, and there isn't this, and they have to be subject-specific teachers. They're math teachers or science teachers or social studies, and it's harder to be able to create those teams. And I think our building size, someone asked about the population, we have been between 395 and 420 for as long as I can remember, in the last 8 to 10 years. And that has made it very difficult to team in a meaningful way that you're talking about.
Do we know, like, I have a question. Mike made a point, and it seems like a lot of this is being attributed to absenteeism. But it seems like there's other factors at play, like what's the culture in the school, what's the environment? Something else besides absenteeism seems to be playing into these declines. Have the leaders identified anything that they think? I mean, the data says a lot of things, but what do you think? What's the areas that you've identified and problems besides just hoping the absenteeism gets better?
And let me follow on that, the more specific question, and then you can answer with your observations. But for the people who are in the buildings every day, I'm not in the buildings every day, are particularly in the middle school and the high school, are students distracted by electronic devices and behaviors that are occurring? And if yes, is that contributing to a lack of academic performance? And if yes, what are we doing to fix that?
That's a great question. And I know the high school's gonna have.
I'm curious as to why like referrals isn't also a part of this. That's the one piece that I'm missing. I know there was a special ed part for the elementary. Being a middle school teacher, things are outrageous where I am that I've never seen before, and it is totally distracting. Trying to think of how to say this the polite way, where not only the teachers maybe not understanding the classroom, but the administration not understanding how to deal with or properly dealing with situations. Hence, a teacher not feeling supported and not feeling that I'm being backed on what I'm doing. But I know I'm going off on a tangent. I just see a lot of differences in student behavior now than in the past 15 years of teaching. And there's like a dynamic that's changing. And is that the problem of not seeing how many referrals or how many suspensions and things like that? I think is a missing piece of the pie here.
Over the last 2 years, as part of our presentations, this year and last year, we talked about discipline and social emotional support in our budget presentations. Last year we spent a lot more time on it. The reason why Mr. Goff was hired at the elementary school was to address exactly those things you're talking about. The reason why we reinstated deans and are using them at the middle school and high school, the reason why we have 3 more social workers than we did 2 years ago is exactly what you're talking about. Unquestionably a contributor in it, and as are the distractions that Mike is talking about. There's a list of 30 things, and we're working at them one at a time.
Right, but are those things working? Is the dean working? Are all those things that you just mentioned, do we feel like they're working?
Well, I think we're having this conversation in 2 different bubbles, right? We're looking at statewide, in which case the playing field should be fairly even. If what's a problem here should be a problem globally. But then there's things that are happening uniquely here that are making an impact negatively here. So I just want to make sure we're able to put those in the right perspectives.
To answer Pete's question, in every school in New York State, it's not working.
Right.
You answered it with your own self-affirmation. The behaviors and the world that you are working in right now is unlike any you've worked in 2 decades, 2+ decades. And our professional staff, who are, whether it's their first year or their 31st year, are working in a different school than it was last year or the year before. Fallout from a lot of things has been significant. And I mean, as an added factor, you're saying, why is the middle school such a hot mess or the high school such a hot mess? Developmentally, cognitively, physically, between that age of, figure they're 9, 10 years old in elementary when the pandemic started, and now, that very crucial developmental adolescent span of time, they were spent in a world that was not anything like we grew up in. Again, every child in New York State, we're being compared to every school in New York State, but 30 factors, and all you're asking for, Mike, is have we considered what each one of them are? And what the principals, the leaders are proposing to you is what they are focused on working on. Instructional program, quality tier 1 instruction. We didn't talk about added social emotional support, although all of us are responsible for that. We talked about it in the budget presentation. We didn't talk about referrals. We've talked about that in our prior presentations. The idea is that if we are teaching every student have the same experience, a quality experience, whether they're in a teacher A's 7th grade math class or teacher B's 7th grade math class, or in 3rd grade at Peter B or in 3rd grade at Becker, they need continuity of instruction, quality instruction, the teachers being professionally developed, so they're teaching to the standards, leaders doing walkthroughs to ensure that the quality of the work is on par, content specialists assisting us in that because they have release time to do that. If there were a book or there were a list that answered these questions, every school would be performing at 100%. That's the biggest problem. I wish there were a book. And we're trying to adapt what we know to our situation here.
Well, the biggest problem for me is the comparative numbers of where we stand versus other schools. So we are collectively as a world facing these issues, but for some reason we are performing at a level far below our peers.
And we've sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Our teachers can teach their hearts out in the classroom, but if there's an environment that's not conducive to learning, it doesn't matter what teachers do, because the students are not going to learn. And I don't know if it's electronic devices, I don't know if it's behaviors, I don't know if it's bullying, I don't know what it is. I want to know what it is. I hope we can learn what it is so we can address it. But these are the questions that have to be asked. These are not data-driven questions. This is what's happening in the building that's reflective of these poor scores.
We've had these scores for 30 days. And that's exactly every conversation that the committees have had in their own buildings. So expect that we'll be able to more thoroughly answer that because we need to. In the past, when we've been identified in certain subgroups, we've rotated in order to get to the needs of certain groups. And that intervention has worked, despite the fact that we only had because remember, it came out in March, publicly available in March. The test started today. We are supposed to intervene and change the outcomes in that window of time. We're really expecting to change the outcomes for our students who are taking April, May exams in 2024. That's where we're going to be able to demonstrate that we've made the difference, unfortunately.
Did we not know for years now that we had issues in these two schools? Yeah. Were we caught by surprise in February when this data came out?
As Carol mentioned, we had issues, but not in these areas. These are different areas than the ones that we've historically had them in. So that is harder to explain. I know we're building right now to try and improve the outcomes in 2024 and between now and then. The chances that students are going to do better on the assessments they took today and in the next 3 weeks because of what we found out 30 days ago.
No, I'm more concerned, I'm more concerned when we look at data in real time, right? We're looking at first quarter and second quarter and halfway through third quarter in a group setting of middle school that are obviously going in the wrong direction. And that has nothing to do with the global, right? If we can solidify what's going on here, we should have better global. Maybe not where we want to be, but 3 steps in the right direction. So when I look at things that are specific to the schools, and this is all very positive, it's all very cheerleady, but I see provide interventions for all students. If we don't know what those deficits are, if we don't pinpoint where the problems are, you cannot guide interventions to correct them. So I think this is a wonderful presentation, but there's no meat on the bones. It doesn't help us to really look at how an intervention should affect change in a positive way.
So Denise mentioned as part of this, and she put it on the slide, the issue is FastBridge, which is our progress monitoring tool, isn't sufficient. It's not digging down to where we need to go, is what you're talking about, Tina. So we need to resolve that issue. We need a measurement tool that is able to measure why the child is not performing well on a specific assessment.
My concern is this first bullet here under interventions where it says provide high quality tier 1 instruction. Why is that a proposed action to fix something when it should already be in place?
Great question, Jenny.
Okay.
Yes, it should already be in place.
But why isn't it? Or
Because
why is
we're
it a
human
proposed
beings.
action?
There's 225 human beings doing this work. We're not all created the same. Some of them are brand new, some of them are 30 years, some of them are teaching in a new content area. We're all developing. We need to develop them in a way so that everyone is teaching with good quality. Not just knowing the content, but delivering it and engaging. I keep showing that circle, which is challenging, engaging, meaningful. All of us need to do that. It's not just about content.
So this year,
That's
we're
what
not
I'm
gonna
saying.
do high-end quality teaching, we're just gonna work on that for 2024, and we're just gonna, you can just give up the rest of the year? That's the problem. I'm with you, this is
No, I
the third
agree.
time we asked the same question, is tier 1 instruction should be happening every single day, all year, all the time.
And that's why that's
I
exactly
mean,
right.
we're worrying about 2024, and
I'm not worried about the data necessarily, especially not the state scores per se, but when the proposed intervention is to provide quality classroom instruction, that concerns me. I feel like that should already be in place.
And moving people around shouldn't affect our instruction, or we shouldn't be moving them around. I mean, unless we have an issue or a problem, but moving people around shouldn't be a reason that we aren't having tier 1 instruction. I mean,
The teacher should be an effective teacher, and if they're effective in the place they are, like Teddy's saying, keep them there. I
But
don't
is
know
the
why they would be
effectiveness of
moving
the teacher, it sounds like, I think the comments are coming off, we're not attacking.
Right.
We're asking questions that are very concerning. And I think that a question would be if a teacher, if they are a good teacher, and I don't want to label tier 1 or whatever, but is there something happening? Is it a behavioral thing that's happening in that classroom that's resulting in the kids not doing as well? It may not be the teacher is not giving quality education. It may be something else going on in that classroom that's preventing the results. So when we say what is going on, that's what we're asking.
it's not necessarily a teacher issue.
Right.
It's what's preventing a kid from. It should be what's preventing a kid from getting a tier 1 education.
Right.
It's not necessarily the instructor. There's other things. It comes back to the other. I would tell you later on. You have a better slide that what research tells you. What's preventing kids from getting a tier 1 education?
But
It may not all be instruction.
I'm with you too, that what do the teachers, the administrators, the district at large need from the board in order to be successful? What can we help to do? I mean, we're all here for the students, for the success of the district. We're all invested in this. We all either have or had kids that went through here, and we want them to be successful. And I think not all of them are being successful. What can we help to do?
Like
Do they need more resources? Do they need more staff? What needs to happen?
Is it electronic? Is it something policy-wise? I mean, the board can look at policies, can look at a lot of things. So, but we can't take anything up or do anything unless those issues are brought to us.
Do they need more empowerment to control the classrooms and the hallways?
We don't know what to look at.
I mean, you look at, and of course we get ahead of the high school and presentations coming up, but I'm going to, steal some of the thunder from a future slide of why don't students come to school? What is some of our problems in school? It tells you. They're viewing classes as boring, irrelevant, waste of time, not having positive relationships with teachers, not having positive relationships with students. These are all things that obviously somebody dug up somewhere on research of, are these all the issues of why we're struggling? This isn't a teacher teaching, but what can we do different to change these things in our school? If this is what the research is changing, it may not be instructional, it may be these things.
I mean, one of the big things
I don't know.
they do not feel safe at school.
That's
is on there. To me, that hits home because there's a lot of behavioral issues, not just in our school, in every single school, but That's a big point. If they're not feeling safe, we need to do something about that.
Or if they're not feeling loved or cared for. or
Right,
valued.
right, exactly. So when we say from the board, what can we do? We can work on policy, we can work on things, but we don't know what to look at and what to address unless those specific areas are brought to our attention.
The only thing the board can do is hire a superintendent, approve policy, and approve a budget.
That's not what I'm asking.
So that, no,
That was very patronizing.
That was very,
No,
right, that's not what I'm asking.
Now let me finish what I'm saying. So the board supports through funding things that will improve these outcomes, such as hiring new staff. We created new positions this year, such as supporting professional development, which the board has generously done so. All of your professionals and organizations, tell me that every single one of the professionals in your organizations is equally skilled. So Jenny, you're asking, why isn't everyone getting quality Tier 1 instruction? Because some teachers are new. Some teachers have moved into a new tenure area. Some teachers have not had professional development in years. There's lots of reasons why.
Maybe I'm not communicating my question
No.
clearly. My question is not why they aren't. Why is that the first intervention?
Oh, just
that
because...
should already be in place. Why
No.
is it being listed as the first intervention to solve problems? It should already be there. It's a part of our whole thing, and I'm not trying to.
It's not
attack
being aimed
anyone.
at the teachers.
I'm not.
No.
I think the teachers are fabulous. I've loved all the teachers my kids have had. Truly, I really have. But why is it being listed as the response to fixing something when it should already be in place in every classroom? And I get that some people are new, and I get that some people haven't had professional development. That makes sense to me. But it should already be in place. It shouldn't be the solution to the problem.
And that's not a new scenario. I mean, that's
Maybe
that's
I'm not
standard operating
communicating it
procedures.
effectively.
You have people at different stages of their career every year.
I guess my concern is the answer that you just gave to my question, Brian. Yes, the board is there to support, but as far as the board policies that are in place in regards to behavioral issues and all that, those policies are written and changed by the board on the recommendations of the superintendent, yes. You collect the data from everybody, and then you bring it to us. But there's other things that are, obviously, we're asking what is going on, because there may be areas within that policy manual to look at, and that may need to be changed or addressed.
Yeah.
So that was my point. I wasn't trying to intervene in how you run the school at all. It's just, what can we do? We don't know where to help unless we know the information. That was it.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be, I apologize. What I was trying to say is that we address it through policy and by funding programs and support that help to change the outcomes. Jenny, you'll see Tier 1 intervention at every single presentation we ever do, because, I mean, it's like saying you work in a marketing firm. If you don't have customer service at the top of the list, you would always have it on the top of the list. You wouldn't omit it because it's an obvious thing that you'd give good customer service.
I think it's just word.
Yeah, if you list it as an
You provide high-quality instruction across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Your first thing under intervention is your Tier 1 interventions, not Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 interventions by the teacher in the classroom. So I think it's just worded wrong, I really do. I don't think that's, I think we're taking it
Or
somewhere
put it
that's
above
not
the
meant to
line,
be.
yeah.
But all teachers provide high-quality instruction. If you don't belong in this business. So I don't see that as an intervention.
Right. That's my point.
I think that's what everybody's saying, like, this is what we do. The school provides high-quality instruction. That's not an intervention, that's not changing anything. It's what do we do after that when that's not working? And that's where you start with the Tier 1 interventions, not Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 interventions means the teacher is making changes in the classroom to differentiate for the kids, to deal with social, emotional, whatever it is. And then you go on to the Tier 2 and so on. But those are interventions, they're not necessarily changing the instruction.
Right.
Okay.
Is there an answer from the teachers as to why any of these questions? Because I mean, I know there's one teacher in the room, but we're talking about what's happening day to day. My administrator at my school, I'm lucky if I see him once or twice, he's a busy guy, as I know all of you are. And we ask the teachers, hey, you know what, it's that stupid cell phone that we don't have, we need to have a policy on that they're putting in their lockers, something like that. I don't know what the proper way, I know teachers aren't gonna come here and tell us, or maybe they wanna come here and tell us everything that's going on, but is there a way to pool them and
I'd argue that the things that you're all guessing at are unquestionably contributors. You see it in the newspaper, you know it from your own children, you know it from your personal experience. Distractions, social emotional health, behavioral issues, absenteeism, electronics, social media.
So
They're
why
all
isn't that on here then? Why isn't that one of the actions to take? We're gonna focus on, we have a cell phone policy, is it enforced consistently? Do we make our students adhere to it? And if not, is that causing a distraction? Is that taking away from the academic experience? And if yes, why isn't that on here? We're going to enforce our cell phone policy. We are going to get control of unruly behaviors that may be happening. How are we going to do that? Well, then you have conversations about how are we actually going to enforce the code of conduct that we have in place. I don't see that on here. And that's the heart of what we're talking about here, is the environment within these buildings. We know what's happening at elementary school is working. And, you know, elementary school kids are compliant, generally cooperative.
More, yeah.
And then turn into crazy people when they get into middle and high school, right? And we need to guide them. What are we doing to guide them and keep them on track?
Yeah, it's unquestionably an element. So we don't mind contributing that as well. It's a very important element. You know, 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic, New York State developed a draft school culture and climate survey for students in order to try and address some of those things. And of course, it disappeared for a couple of years. But you know, just hearing feedback from families and yourselves through the student experience, what's going on in their schools, they are talking about those things. You're spot on as being contributors to outcomes. So they are important.
Okay, then we need to address them. We need to have an intervention for cell phones and behaviors. That's what we need to do here. We need to keep providing high quality instruction, no doubt, but we need to address the other stuff going on.
The cultural environment.
The barriers.
Yeah.
We want to go through the rest of this presentation, and that way, and then if we have any other questions, I don't want to leave the high school people out. They put a lot of work into this,
Yeah.
but there are a few things. I mean, and I'm only one person. I mean, I don't know if we need to go through this accountability data thing again. I mean, we all have the chart. We've seen it from all our schools. I don't know how much of a conversation we need to still have with this. Right. We know there's a problem or an issue. The other one I was going to tell you to skip is, I mean, there's charts in here for regions data, and I don't know if we need to go, the numbers are there. My only question is, and this drives me crazy, and we have this conversation, I think every single year, is, like, I don't know why we're doing comparison to these schools. Like, what is wrong with using Ichabod and Cobleskill and Johnstown and schools within our area that we can compare data, like us? I mean, comparing to schools in Syracuse and Plattsburgh and Kings, like...
Because those schools have the same demographic data as us, that's why.
Those schools are financially similar to us. They have the same percentage of economically disadvantaged students. They're about the same size as us, and they have the same percentage of students with disabilities.
And with the regions, it's easier to say, to compare, like, if you had all the same resources at the table, why aren't students in a certain discipline doing as well?
I mean, I'd like to see the comparisons. I mean, Ichabod Crane School is not that much difference. Shalma is not that different than we are. These are schools we're in and out of all the time. I mean, the numbers can't be that far off, that these other schools are that much comparable to us than some of those. It's just easier to compare to schools in our area.
Yeah, I understand why.
I mean, versus someone in Syracuse. We don't know the environment in Chittenango or Depew, Highlands down towards the city. Like, it's a different environment. It's easier for us to look at charts. And this is just my own gripe, because we've talked about this plenty of times before, of having comparable schools in our area to look at. I mean, I can compare us to Ichabod. I can't compare us to Chittenango.
What happens, and you're right, Teddy, because we know what the environment is there. We've been there, worked there, had kids play there. We frequently, when we show, here's Ichabod, Shalmont, South Glens Falls, we get Well, those schools are different because they only have 1,200 kids. Those schools are different because they have different socioeconomic status. But we can absolutely do that, no problem. Carol
Right.
actually has disaggregated it with those schools as well.
Right, it's probably just pushing a different button
Yeah,
anyways.
and we'd be happy to share it. We can share it with you.
And I know
away
there
from
are
this.
schools in our area that we don't need to compare to, that we're not going to compare to. We don't need those. I mean, I know what they are. We can all read the paper and,
Right. Okay, yeah, and I agree that you can see the data that's there, but, and the high school staff can talk about what some of the interventions are that they're thinking.
Good evening.
Welcome.
I'm going to skip a few.
This one right there.
Where'd it go?
Right back to,
Survey.
that one right there.
This
To me,
one? No, I'm going to go to a different one.
Are these our problems?
I don't know if I made, earlier in the day, I made changes that I don't think it got on here. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Phones are a humongous problem. They're huge. It was on here. It's on mine that I printed out. I'm going to let Mr. Tetford go through some of our referral data that we came up with. But I would say, just estimating, because we would have to go referral by referral, 90% of our referrals include a phone in some way. If that's maybe estimating low, to be honest with you. We looked into, they're called, so yes, we do need help from you, and we need to review the cell phone policy, no doubt about it. Bethlehem is currently looking at, they're called Yonder bags, Y-O-N-D-R, and they're magnetic bags that you put your phone in. The magnet when you walk into school closes it, and the magnet when you leave school opens it. Bethlehem's looking at it. Schohary's using them right now. But I'm going to let Mr. Tetford just give you some of the rundown of our statistics on referrals, which you will see is very alarming. And it's estimated we estimated 3 days suspension for the suspensions that he's going to talk about. Per suspension is 450 days that students are out of class. So I'm going to let him do that, and then you can ask me whatever you want to ask me.
Good evening. So to date, processed through my office 742 referrals. 742 of those referrals have resulted in 118 suspensions. Most of the time when a student is suspended is 3 to 5 days. 72 of those referrals have resulted in school placement. 170 of them have resulted in detention. On a positive note, we have had 138 positive referrals. And we have 12 students that have 10 or more days of suspension. And just to give you just a quick overview, I have a student that got suspended today, and in the last 13 weeks, he's been suspended 3 times for vaping e-cigarette. He has lost 13 days in the last 13 weeks because of vaping. And they're told that it doesn't matter if you're 14 or 40, okay, you cannot smoke on school grounds or use e-cigarettes, plus you're under 21 and it's illegal. And they've been told since day one, when I did my code of conduct presentation, that it's illegal and that your first time caught is 3 days suspension, second time is 5 days suspension. There's many school districts that are doing automatic 5-day for doing illegal on school grounds. Somebody brought up safety. So 10 of the 742 referrals have been due to fighting. 7 were assaults, 23 were bullying, harassment, discrimination. And again, these are all rough numbers that I just pulled off of School Tools, the dashboard. So.
Bullying, harassment, assault. No, not assault. Were they substantiated? Or is that the total number of bullying numbers, or are those only the numbers that you could substantiate?
Those are the numbers that have been investigated. We have the evidence to go ahead and discipline in consequence.
So those are the numbers, if I'm hearing right, that you've investigated that have been substantiated.
Yes, sir.
That's not the total number of reported bullying incidences yet, because if you can't substantiate it, you can't.
Right. It's hard to.
So the number could be much higher.
I would say it's not much higher.
But it's higher. Okay.
There's probably a few incidences where the student has been spoken to that this was the complaint. I didn't have enough evidence to go ahead and consequence that student severely.
And the vaping and stuff like that.
Yep.
The big, where are the targeted areas that you're finding that it's occurring? Is it the bathrooms?
It is the bathrooms. Okay, the incident this morning happened in the back of the chorus room. So you know, there are incidences of that happening.
So I guess one of the questions would be, okay, we know it's happening.
Yep.
What's the solution? Well, that's good. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not bad that we don't know, but
right.
That's Nobilski's prize.
I mean,
what I'm saying.
outside of me walking into the bathroom, and and again, I only have 2 building aides. The building aides walking into the bathroom, catching. One of the policies that we implemented: if we walk in and there's 2 more kids into the stall, they come down to my office. They empty their backpacks and their pockets, because if there's 2 or more kids in the stall, they're not using the bathroom. Okay.
So,
As a matter of fact, it has gotten out that 2 kids that we caught recently came in, didn't even have to say a word, emptied their backpacks right onto our desk.
so I have a hard time accepting an answer for anything that's just, well, there's nothing we can do. I mean, I don't know what the solution is.
I can tell you, we can hire more building aides, that's what we can do. We've tried, and there's nobody that's applying.
Right. You would try to hire 2 back in January. 3 in the past. Yeah.
But I don't want to age
4
myself.
right now.
No,
Yeah, 4 would be ideal in the high school.
Postings went out and nobody applied, they came and went. We did try to get for 2 more.
Okay.
We were approved to post for 2 more and just get no applications.
I just got to ask, I mean, I grew up in a day where kids smoked cigarettes in
Right.
bathrooms. I mean,
Right.
how much more different is it for perspective for parents who might not understand? Or is it?
It's not different.
It's not any different. So
It's not any
that
different
really
than when
shouldn't
we
be
were in high
something,
school.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah, but the sheer numbers may be a lot greater in vaping than.
The difference though is it's harder to catch.
it's harder to catch.
Right, the vaping's a lot harder to catch, especially with some of the smaller vapes that I have confiscated. I mean, they fit right into their hands. You can't even tell. They could be, but they're sucking it in, you know?
Are there detectors?
There are, but you gotta be right there to catch it. That means I would have to be sitting in front of my computer, hit the camera, and then figure out who has it.
Is there a different system though that would give better alerts?
Not that I'm aware of.
So, yes, we went through a camera system with, do I need to be on the mic?
Yeah, good.
And Bill has met with the same, Bill Schramm's met with the same people that we met with in Hunter. There are camera systems there that link to your vape detectors, that when the vape detector goes off, it immediately brings that freeze frame up to the last person that went into the bathroom. The issue is when you go into a bathroom at some point during the day, there's 17 kids in there. So who's doing it? Do we question all of them? Like, you know what I mean? So to answer your question, yes, there are, but still there's so many bathrooms. I mean, and they flush them down the toilet. Like, we had to close bathrooms down, was that yesterday?
Yes.
We had to close bathrooms down by the cafeteria yesterday because the pipes were clogged. They came, they flushed them, they snaked it with a camera, and Bill showed me the camera, and there was padlocks flushed, vapes flushed, what else was in there? It's disgusting. So we've locked those bathrooms now, but, you know, unless like Herb said, unless we hire somebody full-time to watch the camera and then just go run to that bathroom and hope they catch them, or close every single bathroom in the school down and the schools have done this, but we don't have the personnel to do it, and sit somebody out each bathroom and sign 1 kid in at a time, I don't know really.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if the vaping is necessarily contributing to classroom problems, right? It's a health
Correct,
problem, right?
correct.
It's
But it contributes to an out-of-class problem.
Right. But
Right.
that's
So,
been monitored by the teacher, right? You've asked to go to the bathroom, you know, three times now.
or it's between periods. We've done that. We've monitored. We have a sheet that all teachers have. We've monitored out of classroom time. If you've gone more than a few times, they're being told no. We've done all of those things. they get creative, right?
Yeah.
So one of the initiatives that we have taken since I've gotten here is you have to be where you are assigned at all times. And kids don't like it, right? They are roaming, they don't go to lunch, they just roam the hallways during lunch. 10th period, you know, we're making them now sign into classes and have accountability where they are 10th period. So that's one of the big initiatives, and I think that we've done a pretty good job of starting to make progress. We put into place a past restriction list, so every 3 to 4 weeks we meet in the DLR, counselors, school psychologists, health, social workers, and we have a list from every tab, 9, 10, 11, 12, of students that are failing 1, 2, 3, 4, and we go down and we meet for, I don't know, it was like 3 hours that one day, 2 or 3 weeks, and we go and what intervention can we do for this kid? Do they need to be in a reach out room? Do they need to be in an academic support? Do we have to take their lunch away? Like we meet every 3 to 5 weeks. We've implemented past restriction. So if you're failing 2 or more subjects, you can't get a pass to come to the library, to go to a different study hall to be with your friends. Study halls are social. They're not study halls. They're social time. They're on their phones and they're TikToking and whatever the heck else they're doing on there. So the big initiative I think that we've taken since I've got here is you have to be where you need to be at all times, no matter what. And it's throwing them into a frenzy, but like Herb said, I think it's working because it's getting out that we're checking and we're sweeping 10th period to make sure that you're being where you're supposed to be and you're not roaming the hallways with your girlfriend and your boyfriend or making TikToks by the pool. So we're trying our absolute best. Phones are an issue, big time.
That was going to be the next question, right? If vaping isn't necessarily a classroom problem, other than spending time outside the classroom, sometimes phones are the problem, right?
In my opinion.
What do we need to do?
Take them away.
Yeah.
Phones are a problem, but also AirPods. AirPods are a problem. Your kids wear their hats and their hoods, and you can't see if they have an AirPod in, so are they really paying attention in class? We had, you know, I don't want to, we'll talk privately about that. Yeah, they're a problem. Those bags, you can't just go on and see how much they are. I watched the video on them today, so I scheduled the time for them to reach out to me that we can do a webinar with them to see how they work. They have a whole program for schools that they train us how to use them. They come in and they do presentations for parents. They do presentations for the board. They'll do anything basically that we want to do. It's probably not cheap.
Are teachers told if a phone is out in the classroom when it's not supposed to be to make that referral every time, and you will be supported in making that referral?
Yes, but consistency is key.
But you also, the teacher is asking them to use their phones.
Right, I think.
But, so we also get, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we also, everybody has a Chromebook, in theory, but my Chromebook's dead, forgot to charge it, can I use my phone? My Chromebook's dead, forgot to charge it, can I use my phone? And what are you gonna tell them? Like, okay, you can use your phone,
That's
but then.
fine if
What's
the
that?
teacher gives permission, for whatever reason, right? Either your Chromebook's dead, or we're gonna do a project that requires you to use your phone, that's one thing.
For
But
sure.
if that permission has not been given and there's a phone out,
So we've asked if we could get, and teachers have asked if we can get extra Chromebook chargers in the class, because that might alleviate some of that, well, my Chromebook's dead, well, here's a charger that you can use, plug it in, you know what I mean? So we can order extra chargers so that every classroom has 5 or 6 extra chargers in it, so that might take that problem away as well.
And they're secretive, you know, you can tell
Yeah.
their cell phones away, but, you know, they're great. They don't even look at them to do what they're doing sometimes.
My opinion, if we're gonna do it, buy the bags and lock them up. That's.
Is it one bag per student or are there
Yeah.
multiple phones going into?
No, 1 bag per kid. It's
So
like
you're
a
gonna
little.
have a lot of community outroar over that, I could.
Say what?
There's going to be a lot of families of parents that are not going to be comfortable with their children.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that's a reason not to do it.
We just went through this in Hunter. We banned phones. Like at this time, 2 years ago, we put out a statement. As of September 1st, you're not going to be able to have your phone. No AirPods. We held a community forum for anybody that wanted to come in and speak about it. And I was ready to take a beating. You know what I mean? Like people are going to come in and just like have my head for this. But you'd be surprised the amount of people that were there that were like, finally. You know what I mean?
How does that work?
Finally.
How does that work with the bag? What did you do in Hunter? Was it the
No, we just made, we didn't have the bags, we just said that they couldn't have them, and then
Policy.
you, correct, and then it really is gonna fall on the consistency of it being implemented. If one person doesn't do it, it's dead. It's gotta be consistent.
No,
Say
because
what?
you're taking away a valuable educational tool. These kids are gonna be on cell phones the rest of their life. If we take it away from them in high school and say you can't use it, you're taking away a valuable tool. It's just gotta be used correctly.
Right, and it's the responsibility, we're teaching them as a graduated response.
I totally agree.
It's
I'm
an
there every
addiction,
day.
it's bad. It's an addiction.
Isn't it though, it can't be used without permission by the teacher in the classroom?
Correct, but then there's, then
Put it
there's,
in the bag and lock it up, then that takes away all.
So every-
It's not
I'm-
the bag thing, it's just a policy.
Would each teacher be able to have a lock?
correct.
They're in a
Every
bag.
teacher would have the ability
Each
to
teacher
unlock
has
their
a lock,
bags.
And they say, we're gonna use the phone for educational purposes in class, they can unlock them, use them in phone, in class. Then they're locked up, they can't
Correct.
be on them in the hallways, taking pictures, doing stuff that they're not supposed to be doing, right?
The time between classes, the 3 minutes between classes, lunch, study halls are the problem, the biggest problem. Like I observed classes today, I didn't see a single phone, none. It was tremendous. But it's you could put an obstacle course in the hallways and put a camera out there and be on America's Funniest Home Videos, I think. Kids don't pay attention. They're just on their phone, on their AirPods. They have no clue what's going on. It's the in-between classes, lunch, study hall, where it gets them in
So
trouble.
if they were in their bags, you would eliminate that issue, but the educational issue wouldn't be taken away, because if they want to be used in the classrooms, they can be.
Again, I watched a 4-minute video, so by no means an expert on these bags, but every teacher would have the ability, it's like a little wand, every teacher would have the ability to unlock the bag if you wanted to use it for educational purposes, yes. That's what I got out of the 4 minutes of it that I watched.
Sounds like a nightmare. From somebody that does this all day long, it sounds like an absolute.
It sounds like a nightmare right
It
now.
can't be any more of a nightmare than what
In my
we're dealing with
classroom,
right
it's
now.
not. Because I have total control, I say when we use it, when we don't. If I see it out when it's not supposed to be, I take it. It's simple, it really is. It's
That's not the reality
The
here.
problem's not in the classroom, is what they're saying.
If it's not in the classroom, I don't see it as a huge educational deterrent, because it's not affecting what's.
But it actually does, because if somebody is Snapchatting another person in the hallway and now they have to go into class and they're upset and now they have to meet in the bathroom, it does. It does impact the class
The
time.
ancillary use.
By a lot. You'd be surprised
I
by,
get they're a pain in the butt, but I deal with this every single day, and it is
So do
not
we.
that big.
And
of an
again,
issue.
the
It really isn't.
flip side of this is, it's a different technology, but it's the same drama that was around students forever, right? You used to pass notes and called somebody names, and you made up lies about them, and you disturbed their day or their week or their month. So it's just a different technology being
It's-
used with the same detrimental thing. We have to teach.
But there's one key big difference. 24/7, they had the access 365 days. And when you and I were in school, and if we did something in the cafeteria, the people in the cafeteria knew about it. Within a matter of minutes, thousands of kids know what happened in the cafeteria. Because it's posted on Snapchat or Instagram or one of the other things that they're using.
But the other difference is when it was us, our age, and there was an issue with it, our parents dealt with it, and it was
Right,
over.
and you're exactly right.
That doesn't happen anymore.
You're
Because
exactly right.
if
I
you
deal
take a
with
kid's
it every
phone
day.
and you tell the parent they can't have it, and the parent gives it back to them,
Right.
that's where you're losing the battle. It's not the phone that's the issue.
And even if you prevent it from happening from 8 to 4, at 4:01, the same thing's gonna happen.
Yeah, but that's not our concern. The
It's
concern
not
It is if we're
It's
using
not
that as
impacting
the
the
argument
educational
for
environment
disrupt,
at that time.
right. But if the argument we're trying to cure here is that it's disrupting the educational event because they're responding to it, they're still gonna always respond to it.
We're upset by it.
Right.
But it's extremely addictive. No matter how you look at it, there is a component. They're extremely addicted. It's just like being addicted to anything else. And there'll be a withdrawal, but I guess the way I look at it is if the principal and the assistant principal of the high school are coming in here and telling us that this is the problem, a major problem issue, I think that's what we're asking for, right? What's going on? What are the issues that you see, and how can we help you?
Yeah, and besides cell phones, what are the other issues that might be contributing to an environment that's?
So I think again, like I said before, like the accountability of, we kind of, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but like we have to take back the not the power, but students would just be able to go wherever they wanted and do, you know what I mean? Like roam the halls and, well, I don't have to be in class, or I can be 4 minutes late, or it doesn't matter. It was only 2 minutes late, right? But if you put that into perspective for them, and we've mapped it out, well, 2 minutes late every period for every day is this much lack of learning time. So we've really put an emphasis on accountability. The thing that's worked the best, I think, and Herb, you can back me up here, is the pass restriction list. That if a student is failing 2 or more, they can't go anywhere. They can't go to the library. They can't go to the lunchroom. They can't go to another study hall to be with their friends, and they don't like being told what to do. So now we actively have students trying to get off of that list by increasing their academics so they can go to the other study hall to see. So that, for me, has been the most powerful piece since I've got here, is you take something away that they desperately want, and that's improved to do that. Same thing with athletics. Like, we've upheld the athletic code of conduct, and there's been students that have been disciplined or on a 30-day athletic suspension, and they don't like that. So they are actively trying to be better because they don't want athletics taken away. They don't want their ability to move freely in the school taken away. So that has worked the best right now. Like, students are actively trying to get off that list so that they can move about more freely in the school. I think having an ineligibility policy, I don't know if there is one, I think having an ineligibility policy is a good idea. We talked about it today at BLT, where if you're failing 2 or more, or 3 or more, whatever it is, if you want to make it in line with the athletic code, that's perfectly fine. But you lose your ability to do anything after school. Clubs, extracurriculars, you can't come to a game and watch. At 40, you go home if you're on academic ineligibility. And that's not a policy I don't think that we have that we could probably use. It was talked about at BLT.
Absolutely.
I agree.
That sounds like good old-fashioned parenting. Really. I'm amazed that this isn't something that's been going on all along. I mean, the idea of just allowing kids to go wherever they want is absurd.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's been, I'm not going to lie, it's been an uphill battle to just take the accountability back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel like we've made tremendous strides, I do. And with the help of the teachers are standing in the hallway 10th, flushing kids out to where they need to be. It's been really a team effort to get to where we are today. But we still have a long way to go, right? I think the vaping is an issue. It's not an in-class issue. It's a huge issue. I don't know what to do other than what we're doing. We looked into educational pieces surrounding vaping, right? So if a student gets caught vaping, they have to, I looked at there's like an 8-module course that they would have to take, so they would basically be ineligible until they've completed this course, which is an educational piece that would be like in lieu of suspending students. So we are looking deep into every avenue that we can look into to try to increase the amount of time that these students are in the class that they're supposed to be. And that's how they're going to get quality Tier 1 instruction, right? So in my mind, quality Tier 1 instruction is giving the teachers the tools that they need to provide that high quality instruction. I think that we need to increase the technology in the classrooms. I think that that's a deficit that we need, and I think that we are handling that right now. We have like pull-down shades and stuff in the classrooms where we modeled some smart boards. We had Promethean in here. There's a couple. The one in there, what's that one in there? Is that it down? The one that's in the DLR is like, so I observed a class earlier this year where, so all the new ones are touch screen, right? So you don't ever have to leave the front of the classroom. So I observed a class this year where the teacher lost probably 8 minutes of instructional time because any time that the image on the board had to be changed, she had to walk to her computer, click it open, walk back to the front of the room, walk back to the computer. It's 8 minutes of instructional time that's lost just clicking something new on the board. So if we increase the technology with the smart boards or the Promethean boards or the touchscreen boards like we have in the DLR, that's going to increase instructional time by 8 minutes per period, which really is a big deal. So I think that increasing the technology in the classroom, giving the teachers the tools that they need to provide the best instruction that they can.
I think you're on the right path, and you know, the vaping thing that, I think we still need to look into more and more, because the thing that bothers me is maybe 10% of our students are the problem, but it affects those other 90% that need to use the bathroom, and it becomes a problem.
And we've 100%. Students have come to us and come to teachers, and teachers have reported to us that I can't even get into the bathroom, right? Because there's so many people in there, and they're all in the same stall. And that's why now with our BAs, if you go in and there's more than one person, they're getting searched, no matter what. And students know, like Mr. Tepford said, like the 2 kids came in the other day and just dumped their stuff on the desk. And be like, we know. So it's getting around, but it's going to take a while for that to and it's not just vapes, like nicotine vapes are not, that we've seen an uptick in THC vapes too, which is more concerning. And we have, how many do you think we got? 20 at least. THC vapes. It's not good. It's
You're
not
saying
good.
give the teachers the tools they need to be successful. You're saying that more technology is one of them. Do you have any other suggestions for the tools that the teachers need to be more successful in the classroom?
We could do, so our professional developments, like that, my plan for the summer is we have professional development every month, right, Matt? Every month. So my plan over the summer is to put a survey to the teachers, because you want to give them professional development that they think is going to be useful for them, right? So if I was just planning professional development without input from the teacher, that does no good, right? So I will put a survey out for teachers to tell me what type of professional development that they want next year, and we'll make a plan around that. So targeted professional development with teacher input, like what do they need? No, I don't know if anybody's ever asked teachers what they need to be more successful in the classroom, but that's something that we plan on doing as well.
Great.
So I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that maybe we could think the same way in our other buildings. I mean, the approach that you presented to us to the high school is great. Maybe the middle school has the same approach, and it just wasn't reported to us. But overall,
I didn't really talk about anything that was on my presentation, but.
Well, but the thing is, the presentation, like we all said, Teddy's looking at it, I'm looking at it, this is all great, but what are the other issues? What's going on? And I think you gave us a lot of information.
I think, the last 10 minutes was really good. It gives us a lot of insight of things that need to be changed or things that we need to work on.
For sure.
At least in the high school.
Yep. Good.
Okay, I'm good. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. Historically, underperformance in the area of special education with accountability data, we've always underperformed. So this is not new information. The point I want to make when reviewing this information, and these schools are other comparable schools with similar demographics, is that our students with disabilities at the secondary level, in middle school and in high school, are no different than any other child with a disability in any of these schools. The majority of our students are programmed in general education classes, receiving co-teaching support services, maybe resource rooms. In some cases, we do have 15-1 classes as well, and then we have our 12-on-1 classes. But the majority of the students that you see represented in these numbers are not significantly or severely disabled. These are students with classifications because they may have ADHD or a learning disability or a speech and language impairment. So the point I want to make is that we need to do better for our students. And as I mentioned, I think in 2018, when I came over as a chairperson into this office, we were in the middle of working on a corrective action plan because we had previously been identified for our underperformance. So this is nothing new. And since I've started in the office, and Kate, this is our first year together, my first full year as a director, and Kate Thiebel's first full year as an assistant director together, we've been actively working because we've known that this is a problem. So we've taken many steps, not only now as we're brainstorming for the future, but over the last 2 years, that I'm really hopeful that at the end of this year, we'll see some improvements, and the following year, we'll see improvements. It's not going to happen overnight, but I do feel as though that we've been able to identify some of the barriers for underperformance in special education, and I am very hopeful that moving forward, we will see that shift. So As I mentioned, last year, we really took a lot of time to identify some of those barriers. And just to remind you of some of those things and changes that are in place this year, that I am hopeful that, again, will increase the scores that we'll see in 2023. We added 5 additional special education classes over the secondary level. We added Algebra 1A, 1B in self-contained settings, which is still Regents level curriculum. We added biology, an additional 16 to 21-year-old self-contained classroom, academic tutorial, and we created mental health classrooms. In addition to that, this past school year, we created additional co-planning time for our co-teachers to allow them to develop their lesson plans together. Because as I mentioned, the majority of our students are getting service in general education. In addition to that, we've also added evidence-based curriculum. So as I mentioned, I'm hoping that some of these changes will impact our scores this year, but there's certainly still, room to move forward in the future as well. So as far as next year goes, I think, we're really hopeful that next year we'll have the addition of that special education instructional coach that I've spoken previously about at some of the board meetings. I truly believe that this individual could significantly impact and improve the quality of our services and programs throughout the district, especially at the secondary level, and why. So, the vision is that this coach will act as a mentor and a coach to the special education teachers for improving instruction, improving IEP compliance, and promoting professional learning. We also want this individual to support general education teachers and provide consultation in conjunction with the special ed teacher or case manager on the IEP implementation. And lastly, we want to be looking at that data. So we want the instructional coach, along with administrators, myself, and building admin, to review the special education data to support and assist with making informed decisions related to instructional practices and developing IEPs. Forgot to change the slide here. I really think that just, again, stepping away from the slides for a moment and reflecting the past 2 to 3 years within the Student Support Office, I feel that there has been such a focus on compliance because that's obviously priority 1 in special education. And I think that, unfortunately, in the past, that the quality of our instruction and services hasn't been addressed or supported. So as I mentioned, through that instructional coach, we really hope that we can bring that back into the forefront of working with teachers and with staff to support them and to support our students.
I have a question. Do you feel that one individual can cover all 4 of those schools and effectively do that job?
So it's a secondary instructional coach. So they're primarily going to be working with students and teachers in grades 6 through 12.
Would this be something that would be beneficial in the K to 5 realm as well?
So what we did in the K to 5, it was something that we considered. We have the addition of the 2 UPK, the school psychologist and the speech therapist. We talked about how those folks would be preschool evaluators. Right now, Ms. Tebow has the responsibility of being the CPSE chairperson, although it's a limited amount of time. Taking that responsibility off of Ms. Tebow will give her the opportunity to really get into those self-contained classrooms, those general education classrooms at the elementary level, and do a similar, the improvement and the quality and improvement of the programs at that level. So we're hoping that that will help at that level. Okay. So as I mentioned, I think that now, we identify the problems and the barriers, and we're hopeful moving forward. I would like to highlight a positive from the data that was shared recently. So since 2018, our graduation rate for students with disabilities has significantly improved. It has almost doubled. So in 2018, we had 40% of students with disabilities graduate with their 4-year cohort. So increasing in the years, and then 2022, we doubled up to 74%. There's certainly still room for improvement. We want to see those numbers continue to rise. But comparably, if you look at other, not only comparable districts that you've seen on the list tonight, but districts in this area, we are right on par or above the graduation rate for students with disabilities. So we hope to continue to move that forward as well. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we really appreciate your patience. That was more than a spoonful. That might have been Thanksgiving and some other dinner all at once. What I heard from the board is we definitely want some type of, my suggestion was some type of quarterly reporting around attendance and academic progress centered around specific targets, and if not quarterly, at least around CNI meetings. You asked about how many chronically absent students opt out or into the tests. You asked about correlation between chronic absenteeism and the students who are failing or in danger of failing at the middle school. And I think the last important point, including, we need to observe and include plans around environmental remediations for each buildings, including cell phones, other behaviors, and be able to measure that and report out, because the environmental is just as important as some of the academic, or influences the academic endeavors that we're trying to get to. And our BLTs, our building leadership teams, are really capable of doing introspective work, and as you said, you kept asking what would the teachers say about it. That's the place where it's like the brainchild of that. And the words that Ryan couldn't remember is controlling the narrative. Those are the words he was trying to think of in talking about management and how do you create an environment where students are there to learn. Controlling the narrative about their behaviors on a daily basis is a component of that. And the thing I forgot to mention, Mike, is that at the elementary and middle school, cell phones are not allowed, or electronics are not allowed. At the middle school, they're supposed to put them in their lockers, and when they don't put them in their lockers, if they're seen, they are taken away right away. So it's a different bar than what we experience in the other buildings, but not that there's still not a distraction, because if anybody has it on their person, and as they'd said, if they're moving between classes or in lunch or go to the bathroom, they're doing it. So it is a distraction. And two schools that I know of that have moved to the bags are Schoharie and Green Island have moved to those cell phone bags. It isn't crazy cost prohibitive, at least the systems that they went to. It wasn't out of control expensive. And we'll look into it. And I think you're right, a presentation of the board would probably be relevant around that. Is there anything else that you want us to report back on?
No, I mean, I just want to thank, all the administrators for coming tonight. And, we all have the same goal. We're all trying to make our school district better, and I think it's always getting, different input and, conversations. And I think parents and kids and schools are more challenging now than they ever have been. And it's how we're going to adapt to, teach our kids of the, society we live in now compared to the past. It changes every day, I think. So, but I appreciate everybody's hard work, and, it was a good presentation, and I think a lot of valuable information came out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Yep. Pretty much.
Yeah.
You want to roll with it now? Or
Yeah, you want to keep going? All right, so we're at 10 new business. Kristen's done a great job so far. Anybody have anything they want to add?
Question. Real quick, it won't be long. But on input of what's going on in the schools, what about, there's certain school districts, Niskuna, I think Argyle, they have the board enacted and they elected students to the board where they sit, they don't go to executive session, they sit in.
We have that here.
We've had that in the past. That's
It all depends on the school.
Or Bethlehem doesn't have them on there, they have student senate, but they give a report to the board each meeting.
Yep.
So we hear the student's perspective of what's going on.
We have that.
We've had that.
Sit in your spot.
That's up to
That's up to the
Problem is, the
principal.
one they usually get is so involved in everything else that they miss most of the
We
meetings.
have one and a backup.
It would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying that other districts are starting to do it again, and it may be a good idea. We hear from the administrators, we hear from the principals, to hear from the students' perspective. So it may be something that we want to consider looking into.
We can look into it. Yeah, definitely. We've done it before. Like you said, we had I don't even know if you need a designated one. You could even have multiple, just because a
There's-
lot of these
there's
kids are
like two or
busy.
I think there's 2 or 3 on this unit, and
Yeah.
look how they did it, and
Yep.
it's a possibility.
We've
I
done
don't
that in the
think, I don't
past.
think we ever stopped doing it. I think
No,
we
I
just
think
didn't have
the
anybody.
school, yeah.
We'd be happy to have many things. Nope.
No, it was
Kids
usually a
that volunteer
senior,
to
right?
do it or ask to do it, seniors
Seniors.
usually.
Seniors.
We actually had great participation for a long time because some of the teachers used it as a, I think it was part of PIG, participation in government,
Yeah.
and we would all sign off on their attendance.
Yeah.
So they sat here for the whole time and they'd get credit for being here.
Good
That's
idea.
what I had to do in high
Yeah.
school. Everyone had to go
Yeah.
to board meetings.
Okay. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Yep. Old business. We've gone through some of these. BOE committee reports, we have nothing new. Policy adoptions, we have nothing new. No hearings and petitions. Upcoming activities, BOE meeting and Meet the Candidates Night is on May 3rd at 6 o'clock here in the library. We have no reason for executive session. Motion to adjourn. Mr. Benedetti, Mr. Ross, all in favor? Aye.